Dungeons are mysterious, labyrinthine underground spaces, full of secrets and dangers. Many people go there in search of wealth, risking their lives for a few coins and fame. They are called adventurers, adventure seekers who have long forgotten what fear is. Among them were those who gave their lives in the fight against evil, and the people called them heroes. Among them was a young man who had been working as an adventurer for 15 years, and even joined the heroes' squad to destroy the darkness with his own hands. But only a moment ago, this hero had betrayed him. Luke lay on the cold ground, exhausted and covered in dust, barely moving his fingers. His gaze, filled with bitterness, could not believe that the comrade he had trusted had turned against him. A few hours earlier, they had tried to wake the black-haired boy. His name was Luke. Screaming didn't help, so one of the companions pushed him and angrily called him a worthless, third-rate adventurer. Luke winced in pain and looked at his comrade with surprise and resentment. The latter was seething with rage over the disappearance of the protective amulet, so he ordered Luke to remain in the center of the camp, considering him to be responsible for all the troubles. Luke remembered that moment. He explained that he had placed the amulet exactly where it should be, but the hero did not listen. Due to the absence of the amulet, all food supplies were destroyed, and now chaos reigned in the camp. The hero became even more angry, blaming Luke. In a fit of anger, he hit the boy. Luke did not understand how this happened, because the amulet simply ended up outside its protective circle. Then the hero asked Julia how much food was left. The girl sadly replied that even with the strictest economy, there wouldn't be enough food to complete the task and return to the surface. Hearing this, the hero again exploded with accusations. Luke tried to justify himself, assuring that he had placed the amulet correctly, but his words only irritated the leader. He perceived it as pathetic excuses. Then the black-haired boy pointed to the stones where he had left the amulet. It was obvious that someone had moved it after Luke had placed it. This meant that it was not his fault at all. Seeing this, Luke guessed that the hero must have gotten up in the middle of the night and accidentally knocked the amulet over while checking the supplies. But he wasn't going to admit his guilt. Luke was outraged that he was being accused without any evidence. But before he could respond, a paralysis spell was cast on him. Pain gripped his body, and a scream escaped his lips, echoing throughout the camp. Two girls approached the group. The blonde, a sorceress, was casting a spell that bound Luke. She believed that the most important thing now was to save her own future, even if it meant sacrificing her friend. The black-haired girl, her sister, humbly supported this idea. She suggested reducing the number of troops, since there would not be enough supplies for everyone. Luke, still shackled by pain, could not believe their cruelty. The sorceress, without hesitation, pointed to Luke as a candidate for reduction. The boy froze in shock. The hero and Julia approved of the idea. Fewer people meant more chances of survival. They decided that losing the repairman wouldn't be a big deal. As an act of mercy, the team gave Luke an old sword and ruthlessly left him alone in the darkness. That was why the boy found himself in such a pitiful situation. His heart was clenched with hopelessness, but the paralysis gradually disappeared, allowing him to move and breathe air again. Luke was a third-rate adventurer. In 15 years, he had never risen above E rank. His only talent was his ability to repair things. If he died here, no one would even notice he was gone. The boy couldn't understand how his comrades had betrayed him so easily. They had not only accused him without reason, but also left him to his fate. But Luke decided not to give up. He promised himself to survive and get out of this hell. His gaze fell on the sword the team had left behind. The blade was old and scratched, but Luke saw a chance in it. He realized he could restore the weapon and pulled out a small pouch of magic powder. The boy sprinkled the sword with powder and activated his repair skill. In a moment, the blade shone with light and gained a shine, as if it had just been forged by a master. Luke breathed a sigh of relief. The skill had not failed. This should work, he thought. Luke knew his limits. He couldn't compete with the monsters head-on, so he decided not to draw too much attention to himself and to proceed cautiously. No matter how much time passed, he walked quietly, step by step, without taking unnecessary risks. His only goal was to get out of this dungeon alive, even if the path was endless. 2 weeks passed. Luke still wandered the labyrinth, exhausted and hungry. His strength was failing him every day, but he kept moving forward because stopping meant death. He hadn't eaten a single morsel since his team left him. His only salvation was the mana-saturated water from the cave walls. But even that couldn't replace food, People couldn't live without it for more than a month. He had crossed the point of no return. Half of the adventurers died in these catacombs from starvation. Some, unable to bear it, ate the poisonous moss that grew on the walls and died in terrible agony. So Luke quickened his pace. If he was lucky, he would encounter other travelers and have a chance to escape. That thought kept him sane. Suddenly, a skeleton with a sword leaped out of the shadows. The monster swung at him, but Luke managed to intercept the blow and plunge his blade into the monster's chest, shattering its bones into smithereens. He knew he had miraculously escaped death, but the sword could not withstand the strain. The blade cracked because the previous repair had been done without the proper materials. His only weapon had lost its strength. Luke tried to use the repair skill again, but this time the sword did not recover. The blade shattered into pieces right in his hands. The boy froze in silence. The attempt failed. Then Luke activated his repair skill again and aimed it at the sword. At first nothing happened, but in a moment the blade was restored, as if time had restored its original shine. The boy stared at the weapon in surprise, not understanding why the previous repair had failed. One day he thought to himself, during repair, an object first breaks down into its original materials and then is restored to its original form. At that moment, a lightning-fast idea flashed through Luke's mind. Perhaps he could use this process differently. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the dungeon, the hero was slashing at the wall with his sword, trying to force his way forward. It seemed pointless. Each blow only dulled the blade and wasted his strength. However, the hero did not worry. In case of a breakdown, he could always force Luke to repair the weapon. To him, he was just a carrier of things, nothing more. Remembering this humiliation, Luke gritted his teeth and placed his palms on the wall in front of him. Focusing, he activated repair with all his might. The air around him trembled, and suddenly a section of the stone wall began to bend deeply inward, as if succumbing to an invisible force. Within seconds, the rock split with a dull thud, scattering debris across the ground. A new passage opened before Luke. Seeing this, he laughed with joy. His power could not only repair, but also destroy. He was filled with joy. He had made it alone, without the help of his team, where even a hero would have failed. Luke felt proud for the first time in a long time. His abilities had been of real use. Then he bent over the fragments of the wall and was surprised. These were not ordinary stones, but a strong ore, similar to metal. The material seemed so hard that it could destroy anyone with a single blow. A thought flashed through Luke's mind. His skills seemed to have changed, become stronger. He didn't understand why this had happened, but if it was true, perhaps he could use his new power for his own purposes. The boy picked up the damaged sword and activated repair again. Logically, this ability could not create things from nothing, but Luke felt that something was different now. The power seemed to be striving for a new limit. To restore one, you need to have a similar one. If the necessary material is not available, the skill takes another part of the item, which makes the weapon fragile. Luke knew this limit of his gift well, but not every material was suitable. For the repair to work, the substance had to be similar to the original. And then Luke had an idea. What if he could use the metal of the dungeon wall itself to repair it? If the sword could be restored with ori that even the hero could not break, then this weapon could become the strongest in the world. The realization of this lit a fire of determination in his eyes. Luke smiled with satisfaction as the sword took on a new shine. His repair had worked perfectly. Now it was time to see how strong the renewed blade had become. He held the monster's sword upright, like a target, and swung his own blade. The air split with the impact. It was to be the true test of his new creation's strength. And in an instant, the enemy's sword shattered into two pieces, as if it were made of clay. Luke gazed with delight at his blade. Not a single scratch. With such a weapon, he would definitely be able to find his way out of this cursed place. The boy carefully gathered the fragments of the wall into a bag. They might come in handy. Then he moved through the breached wall faster than ever. If he continued in the same spirit, he would soon be able to get out. In the process, Luke wondered. His skill had truly evolved. Now he felt two forces within it, disintegration and restoration. And then a bold thought occurred to him. What would happen if he applied this to a living being? He placed the lichen in his palm and activated two actions at once, decomposition and repair. But nothing happened. The lichen remained intact, as if nothing had happened. Then Luke remembered. Living beings have their own magical defenses. Every living being has its own mana flowing within it, which resists any external interference. So he didn't stop. He continued to keep the skill active. Although the disintegration was almost ineffective, its power was still a little more effective than before. Luke realized living things are much more difficult to decompose into components. The repair was still not suitable for a living being. Luke had never thought he would use it like this, but now was not the time to think. He needed to find a way out as quickly as possible. Finally, the black-haired boy saw the stairs leading up. His heart fluttered. He had finally reached his goal. Each step up gave him new hope. And now, freedom. Luke stepped outside the dungeon, and the bright sun blinded his eyes. The sky shone with a pure blue. The wind embraced him, as if welcoming him back to the world of the living. The boy fell to his knees in joy and exhaustion. He had survived, escaped from where hundreds were dying. But suddenly his body was weak with hunger. He hadn't eaten in weeks. Looking up, Luke saw a tree with bright berries. Without hesitation, he plucked one and wanted to eat it immediately to quell his inhuman hunger. But before he could take a bite, a strange, unsettling feeling pierced him. Luke dropped the berry, feeling it rot. He was amazed that he had instinctively sensed it before he took a bite. And at that moment, a piercing scream rang out from all around. The boy shuddered and looked around sharply. Without thinking, he rushed towards the sound. A few minutes of running, and breathing heavily, he reached the place where something alarming had happened. Two girls stood before him. One, a black-haired girl with a raised sword, was covering the other. She was ordering her companion Sylvia to flee, but the latter, with tears in her eyes, refused to leave her friend Sakura. Luke, hiding behind a tree, watched them, trying to figure out who they were defending themselves from. But in an instant, the ground shook as a giant paw crushed the trunk in front of him with a single blow. It turned out that the girls were standing before a real dragon with its wings spread. Hot steam was billowing from its mouth, and the ground beneath its paws was trembling. They were desperately trying to defend themselves from a monster that looked so gigantic that even the air around it seemed scorched. Luke froze in horror when he realized that he was facing a real dragon. It was incredible. These creatures never left their lairs. His gaze stopped at the wounded girl. Her sword was broken, and her body was covered in blood. In this state, she had no chance of surviving. Without hesitation, the boy decided to help. He took a piece of material from his bag, which he had found in the dungeon, and threw it directly at the dragon, hoping to somehow distract the beast. The stone hit the monster squarely in the forehead, but it didn't even leave a scratch. The dragon slowly turned its head towards Luke, its eyes blazing with heat, but it didn't even move, as if the man before it was unworthy of attention. Then Luke gathered the last of his hope and threw his sword toward the girl. Sakura caught the weapon in mid-flight and nodded briefly, whispering words of gratitude. She understood that this boy had just saved her life. The next moment, the dragon raised its paw for a deadly blow, but Sakura saw it coming. Focusing, she swung her sword sharply, and the blow of her blade shattered the monster in one motion. The monster fell, scattering into pieces. Her face remained calm, her gaze cold and confident. Sakura destroyed the dragon without a shadow of fear. Luke and Sylvia, stunned, ran to her. They were overwhelmed with relief and admiration. They both ran to Sakura, but the girl could barely stand. Her face was pale and her voice was trembling. She tried to thank Luke, but before she could finish, her body went weak and she fainted. Sakura was breathing heavily, her body shaking from the loss of strength and pain. The deep wound on her side continued to bleed. Luke asked Sylvia anxiously if she had any healing skills, but the girl only shook her head. Luke himself had no healing skills. He could only fix things, not people. But suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. After all, he had already applied his skill to a living object once. Even if the repair was not intended for living things, it still had some effect on the lichen and the walls of the dungeon itself. Perhaps some effect still existed, and there was a chance, albeit a tiny one too. His skill involves taking an object apart and putting it back together again. Luke began to wonder if he could do this to a human body, even though he knew how dangerous it was. The idea was crazy, but there was no other choice. Sakura was dying. There was no help nearby, and her blood was already soaking the ground. The boy knew either he would take the risk or she would die. He took several deep breaths, trying to calm himself. Memories of the dungeons, of the strange power of his skill, flashed through his mind. If he had been able to restore the metal there, maybe this time he could save a life. He couldn't leave the girl to die. Luke clenched his fists and made a decision. He would try, even if he failed. It was better to act in regret than to stand idly by. All or nothing. Sakura regained consciousness for a moment. Her breathing was ragged, but she looked at Luke and smiled faintly. She didn't blame him, even if the attempt was futile. There was still hope in her eyes. Luke focused and activated repair at full power. A stream of energy, like a whirlwind of light, stretched from his hands to Sakura. His mind trembled with tension, and the mana melted before his eyes. He remembered the distant days 15 years ago, when he had just begun his adventurous journey. Then he had seen his comrades die of wounds, and he had stood helpless, unable to help. The memory of it was heartbreaking. He had seen his comrades die, and he, a third-rate weakling, had only clenched his fists and watched. The pain had haunted him all these years. He cursed himself for his helplessness then. Now he didn't want to go through it again. He was willing to spend everything, even his own life, to save someone this time. Yes, he was weak, inglorious, but not so weak as to abandon a man in distress. His eyes burned with determination. He would never again be an idle observer. And now he gave it his all, increased the flow of energy, and forced his skill to work to the limit. The world around him dimmed, and everything merged into the glow of his repair. When Luke opened his eyes, he was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. His body was exhausted, his thoughts confused. The last thing he remembered was trying to save Sakura. Then everything disappeared into darkness. Looking around, he saw a small room. At that moment, Sylvia entered the room. She smiled with relief when she saw that the boy was awake. From her, Luke learned that he was staying at her house, the Spring Foliot Hotel. He had slept for almost half the day. Sylvia was genuinely worried, and he, embarrassed, was about to leave because he had nothing to pay. But the girl refused to take the money. He saved it. Luke was confused. He felt like he hadn't done anything special. But Sylvia's words of gratitude touched his heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt like his actions mattered. Then he asked about Sakura. The girl said that everything was fine. Thanks to him, the wounds had completely healed. Luke breathed a sigh of relief. Now he could sleep peacefully, knowing that he had not failed. Sylvia, smiling, called him uncle and asked curiously if he was a healer. Luke blushed in surprise, but honestly replied that he was just a simple E-rank adventurer. Nothing special. The girl couldn't believe it. Such strength was beyond the reach of an ordinary traveler. But their conversation was interrupted by a loud sound, Luke's stomach loudly reminding him that he hadn't eaten in almost 2 weeks. Soon a plate of hot rice porridge was placed in front of him. Luke ate greedily, feeling the warmth spread through his body. After all the trials, this simple meal seemed like the most precious gift. Sylvia smiled and continued the conversation. Sylvia said that she and Sakura had been pulled straight from the bottom of the dungeon. Luke froze at those words. He had been convinced that the girls were at the entrance, but it turned out that they were 5 levels below. The realization stunned him so much that he momentarily forgot how to breathe. Luke looked at Sylvia in confusion, and she looked at him in surprise, not understanding his reaction. The guy realized that they were talking about different things, and to put everything in perspective, he asked what the name of the place where they met was. Sylvia replied that it was an E-rank dungeon, Sunny Forest. These words struck Luke. He clarified what type it was and heard that it was an open dungeon, resembling a huge amphitheater, full of greenery and light. Luke remembered that he himself had been to the A-rank dungeon called 1,000-Year Passage to Hell. It turned out that the levels of these 2 places were connected. It turns out that the girls had only gone down there to collect medicinal herbs. The boy was shocked. Going deep on his own for newcomers was sheer madness. However, it seemed that no one even tried to stop them. It became clear to him how irresponsible the guild could be. Sylvia explained that the Sun Forest had only officially become a dungeon last year. Before, people from the city would constantly go there, gathering herbs and vegetables, never even suspecting the danger that awaited them. Luke couldn't understand. If the place was officially recognized as a dungeon, why hadn't anyone warned about the appearance of monsters? But the girls just shrugged their shoulders. Even the guild didn't seem to have reported anything. He was surprised that even the guild members he knew didn't know about it. If they were weak monsters, he would understand. But a dragon wasn't something to be missed. Luke couldn't imagine that no one had raised the alarm. But if the guild really didn't know, There was no point in blaming them. Luke apologized to Sylvia for his harsh words. The girl just smiled and replied that she didn't hold a grudge. Then the boy asked her name. She introduced herself as Sylvia of the Spring Leaves Hotel. Her name was well known in the neighborhood. Luke, in turn, introduced himself as Luke of White Wolf Grove. They exchanged brief bows, feeling a mutual respect. Neither of them had last names, which was common among ordinary people. They were called by their place of birth or occupation. Sylvia wanted to ask what had brought Luke to the dungeon, but she stopped when she saw the boy's head drooping wearily. As soon as he finished his rice porridge, sleep overcame him. Sylvia came closer, gently covered him with the blanket, and whispered words of gratitude for saving them when there was no hope. The next morning, Luke went to the bathhouse first thing. According to Sylvia, they were in the town of Green Grove, known for its hot springs. It seemed strange to him to bathe so early, but here it was normal. The water flowed nonstop. He felt refreshed after his bath. The tract was a veritable resort, with restaurants, food stalls, and the aroma of spices filling the streets. Luke felt at peace for the first time in a long time, until he heard someone calling his name. It was Sakura. She looked cheerful and smiling. Sylvia told her that Luke had decided to take a walk around the city, and now they had met by chance among the crowd of vacationers. Seeing the girl, Luke immediately recognized her. He asked how she was feeling. Sakura assured him that thanks to him, she had completely recovered. Her voice was warm, and her eyes were full of sincere gratitude. She admitted that she was still ashamed to remember that encounter with the dragon. As a warrior, she should have been ready for battle, but instead she had been forced to rely on outside help. If her beloved katana hadn't broken, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Hearing this, Luke wondered if she still had the weapon, and where its damaged blade lay now. They went to the room where 2 pieces of a broken katana lay on the table. Luke carefully examined the fragments and calmly said that he could restore it. Sakura couldn't help but smile. Joy and hope returned to her eyes. There was no gun shop in this town, so she was defenseless without help. But she didn't need to worry now. Luke could fix everything. Sylvia appeared in the doorway, interested in the proceedings. She was a little embarrassed, but admitted that she just wanted to see what the sword repair looked like. Luke didn't object. It was a common thing for him, but he let her stay since the girl was on break. When he touched the blade, he felt a strange warmth. Data about the sword appeared before his eyes. The materials, the forging technique, even the master who created it. Luke froze in amazement. He realized this had happened before, when he had touched that berry in the grove. His skill had evolved again. Now he could analyze things, see their structure and condition. He called the skill analysis. With his new ability, Luke could now see exactly which parts needed to be repaired, what material they were made of, and how to properly connect them together in the repair process. His skill became a complex system with several stages. A very short time passed and the katana was restored. The halves fused together and the blade shone with pure light. Sakura and Sylvia looked at the sword with admiration. It looked even stronger than before. The girls couldn't take their eyes off him. Sakura wanted to pay him for his work, but Luke refused. He couldn't take money from those he saved. He explained that he knew how hard it was for her, and that she had saved his life in the fight with the dragon. So this repair was just his way of saying thank you. Sakura smiled and thanked him, truly warmly for the first time. Luke asked if she had any other way to make money, but the girl just sighed. She didn't have any such opportunities. Then Luke suggested that she try her hand at being an adventurer. The guild offered quests of varying levels, and she could choose what she liked. Sakura liked the idea. It was a chance to start a new life. There was a guild building in the city where Sylvia's friend worked. There, near the bulletin board, Luke also had his own business. So the 3 of them set off together to register Sakura and open up a new adventurer's path for her. They were greeted at the guild by a friendly employee. Upon seeing Sylvia, the girl was surprised by her appearance and asked why she had come. Sylvia explained with a smile that she had brought someone who wanted to officially join the guild and begin the adventurer's journey. Then Sylvia introduced her friend Marita, the guild administrator. She immediately glanced at Luke flirtatiously, causing him to feel a little embarrassed. Her demeanor was more like that of a bartender than an official. Marita, leaning in curiously, asked why he had come here. Luke calmly replied that he was already a registered adventurer. They had come to register Sakura, who wanted to join the guild. Sakura bowed respectfully, greeting Marita. Most of the adventurers here were newbies. The danger level in the district was low, so many were coming here for the first time. Marita handed Sakura an application form, her first official step into her new life. Watching this, Luke felt a slight sense of nostalgia. 15 years ago, he had stood in the same place, with the same application form in his hands. Soon, Sakura finished filling out the documents. Marita began to explain the basics of the guild system. All adventurers are divided into 6 ranks, from F to A. Newcomers always start at F and cannot participate in serious raids. Only after completing a few simple tasks do they get promoted to E rank. E level was considered the bare minimum for a true traveler. Luke, even with 15 years of experience, was still at it. The guild determines each person's rank upon registration, taking into account their skills and achievements. Sakura wondered why they had to rank up. Marita explained that the higher the level, the more difficult and lucrative the quests became, and they were also allowed to visit more dangerous dungeons. Dungeons, in turn, also have ranks from A to E. An adventurer can only enter those that are equal to or lower than his own level. If travelers go in a group, their limit determines the rank of the leader. Therefore, Sakura will have to strive for growth in order to discover new opportunities for herself. Marita was leafing through the documents, but suddenly froze, her face filled with surprise. She was silent for a few seconds, staring at the questionnaire. Her eyes widened in shock. Sakura looked at her in confusion, not understanding what had happened. Finally, Marita asked in surprise, "So you destroyed the dragon on the 5th level of the dungeon?" Sakura nodded calmly. She already considered it a known fact. But for Marita, it was news, and the girl almost dropped the papers. Marita said she would immediately notify the guild headquarters. Sakura would receive a cash reward. Defeating a dragon with one blow, and a novice at that, was an incredible achievement. However, Sakura did not take all the glory for herself. She explained that she was only able to defeat the dragon thanks to the sword created by Luke. The audience fell silent upon hearing this. Everyone looked at the modest boy in surprise. According to the rules, the reward should have been shared, because without the sword, there would be no victory. Luke realized that this story had already attracted too much attention to them, but he did not argue. He only added that he had no intention of continuing his adventurous life. Now he wanted to settle in this city and open his own forge, a place where he could make weapons for others. All the guild visitors turned their gazes towards him at the same time. News of the blacksmith who forged the sword that killed the dragon spread like wildfire. Luke became the center of attention without even trying. There was no forge in Green Tract until now. Luke said he would use part of the reward to purchase an old building for his future workshop. The only problem was that the structure had long been in disrepair, but the boy didn't see anything wrong with it. He had the repair skill and was confident that he could revive even a ruin. Sylvia remembered the building, standing on the outskirts of town, leaning and dilapidated. She thought it was beyond saving. But Luke had not lost faith, his eyes gleaming with confidence. Sakura offered to give her share of the reward to help open the forge. Luke refused, but the girl insisted, assuring her that she would quickly earn new money through the guild. He knew it was useless to argue, but he didn't want to take money from her directly. Not knowing how to politely refuse, he just remained silent in confusion. Here Sylvia intervened in the conversation. She offered a compromise to use the money as a down payment for future repairs to the weapon. Sakura readily agreed, and then asked Luke to make her a new katana, as powerful as the one that had defeated the dragon. Hearing this, Luke nodded. He was pleased that she had such confidence in his skills. He agreed to accept this order. Now there was not just a debt between them, but a real contract. He solemnly announced that Sakura would be his first client at the new forge. The girl smiled with relief. She believed that only he could create the perfect sword for her. They shook hands, sealing the deal. It was on this day that Luke finally left the life of an adventurer behind and began a new path, that of a master armorer who creates his own destiny. Soon all three of them came to an old house. It was in a terrible state. Cracked walls, a leaky roof, broken windows. Even the door hung half-broken, swaying in the slightest wind. A tree had fallen on the house during a storm, and it had been empty ever since. Everything inside was in ruins. The furniture was broken. The floor was rotting. But despite everything, Luke saw it not as junk, but as a chance to start over. He decided to test his power of repair on this house. His heart beat faster. He had never had such a large-scale task before. But this time fear gave way to determination. The time had come to revive even that which had long been considered dead. The goal of the restoration was the entire house. Luke decided to replace the rotten parts with wood left after the storm. And suddenly, without warning anyone, he activated his repair skill and directed it at the structure. The air around him hummed as if the very stones had awakened. At that moment, the house began to change before our eyes. The boards were pulled together, the windows were falling into place by themselves, the roof was being tightened with new beams. Sylvia and Sakura watched in amazement and admiration. The destroyed house was being reborn in front of them by itself. After a while, not a trace of the old shack remained. The house stood level, bright, as if new. Sylvia clapped her hands with joy, but when she looked at Luke, she froze. The boy was deathly pale, he could barely stand on his feet. Rebuilding the entire building had drained almost all of his mana. However, even as he struggled, Luke could only think about the fact that he would now have his own shop, and he had no right to stop halfway. The girls looked at him worriedly. He had overstepped his bounds again. But Luke didn't want to rest. He had already made a sign and was eager to open the store as soon as possible. Sylvia and Sakura decided to help with the cleaning so that Luke wouldn't have to take it all on himself. Their concern melted his stubbornness, and he reluctantly agreed to accept the help. After cleaning up, Luke set about stocking his armory. In an old wooden chest lay broken swords, shields, and armor broken and abandoned items he had bought from the guild for next to nothing. To most it was junk, but to him it was a real treasure. Luke took out his rusty sword, placed his palm on the blade, and activated the skill. A stream of energy illuminated the metal, and in an instant the blade began to regenerate. Just before her eyes, the old weapon transformed into a shiny brand new sword. Sakura stood there, her mouth open in amazement. The ordinary shard had become a work of art, as if it had just come from the forge of a great master. Sylvia understood Luke's idea. Repairing damaged weapons was much cheaper than buying new ones. It was the perfect business for him. His skill turned junk into the highest quality product. All that was left was to create an attractive display. Luke planned to use the very sword that had once defeated the dragon as an advertisement for the store. Without it, visitors might be disappointed. But he could not create a copy of that legendary weapon. All the raw materials obtained in the dungeon had been turned into dust, and it was no longer possible to make another such sword from it. Seeing the bag of material, Sakura immediately recognized it. These were the particles that strengthened the blade. They gave the steel supernatural strength, making the sword almost alive. Luke took out some powder, sprinkled it on another sword, and activated the skill. The blade shone, the rough metal smoothed out, the scratches gone. The weapon looked as if it had just been forged. Sylvia couldn't contain her excitement. The reflection of this sword was brighter than that of ordinary ones. The material had clearly done its job. The blade radiated power. Luke nodded in satisfaction and set about the rest of the weapons, carefully restoring each item. Once all preparations were complete, he began to think about where to get more materials for further work. He found it strange that the guild didn't supply such things. After all, weapons and armor were the first things any adventurer needed, and there wasn't even a single forge in the city until now. Sylvia remembered that her grandmother, an experienced merchant, had often said, "There are always loopholes in trade." And now she realized that Luke had accidentally found just such a niche that no one else had filled. Sakura wondered why he had abandoned his career as an adventurer and become a blacksmith. She asked when he had learned to use his regeneration ability so skillfully. Luke was silent for a moment, then sighed and said that he hadn't yet told them what had happened before they met. Then he began to talk about the betrayal of his comrades, about the heroes who had left him to die. Hearing his story, the girls were speechless. They could not believe that someone was capable of such meanness. The name Falcon, Luke's former comrade, evoked in them only anger and contempt. They were enraged by the very idea that a hero could betray a friend. Luke, noticing their fervor, decided not to mention that Falcon was the same hero, so as not to add fuel to the fire, and changed the subject. He told me why he became an adventurer. As a child, he saw travelers coming to his village, strong, brave, full of stories. That's when his dream was born. He remembered sitting by the fire, listening to tales of monster battles, glory, and travel. Even if some of it was fiction, the desire to follow their path had not faded. His parents called it nonsense, but young Luke did not listen. He left his native village to find his own way, and since then he has lived a life full of dangers and trials. Even as an E-rank adventurer, he never gave up. When Sakura asked if he regretted his choice, Luke only smiled. Without that experience, he wouldn't be who he is now. He wasn't ashamed of his journey. Yes, the last task was a turning point, but it was also the one that gave him a chance to start over. Luke was grateful for the pain and betrayal that had led him to a true understanding of his own power, and he could now live in peace as a master armorer, no longer dependent on the whims of his guild. Sylvia and Sakura listened to him with smiles. They were sincerely happy for him. His words were inspiring. They conveyed the determination and calm of a person who had finally found his place. After this frank conversation, all three of them set to work with renewed vigor. They prepared the store for its opening, full of energy and faith that a new bright chapter in their lives lay ahead. Luke checked his to-do list again. He had already ordered a sign for the future store, and all that was left was to finish restoring the items inside. As he walked back to the building, he was lost in thoughts about the future, until someone unexpectedly called his name. It was a man with glasses. He asked if Luke had saved the girls from the Springleaves Hotel. The boy confirmed it, and the man was happy then, because he knew the family that owned the hotel well. As a token of gratitude, he gave Luke a dish from his restaurant. At first, Luke was confused. He was not used to receiving gifts for no reason. However, the man just smiled and said that it was from the heart. The restaurant owner also said that many of his customers were looking forward to the opening of Luke's shop. He wished him luck and prosperity. The guy smiled sheepishly, feeling like he was being treated with respect for the first time in years. When he was an adventurer, no one expected anything from him or thanked him. Now everything was different. Luke tasted the dish. It turned out to be surprisingly tasty, and he involuntarily smiled with pleasure. Meanwhile, Sakura was spending time with the local children. They surrounded her, persistently asking her to show them how the warriors wielded a sword. At first, she refused, saying that martial arts were not for showing off. But embarrassed, she still took out her blade. She threw a wooden plate into the air, and with just 2 lightning strikes, split it into equal parts. The children squealed in delight as the pieces fell to the ground. Even Luke, who was standing nearby, was impressed. He estimated she had hit 2 shots in a second. Her skill was undeniable. Sakura couldn't hide her pride. She loved seeing the surprised eyes of the little ones. She could finally show off her skills without fear or pressure. Luke smiled, looking at her. Not long ago, she had insisted that the sword was not for show, but now she was beaming with praise. The children applauded happily, and Sakura blushed, noticing his gaze. Her movements froze. She looked at Luke in confusion. He stood silently, watching her freeze in the middle of the courtyard with a sword in her hands. She asked awkwardly when he had seen her. Luke, not hiding anything, replied, "Since she said they didn't show off their swords." There was a brief but completely meaningless silence. Sakura flushed with shame. She had never been praised in her home, where displays of emotion were frowned upon. But Luke didn't scoff. He simply handed her the meal he had received from the restaurant. The girl gratefully accepted the kebab and took a bite with appetite. Her eyes lit up. The taste was amazing. She commented cheerfully that she hadn't eaten anything this delicious in a long time. Luke laughed, noting that she seemed to be a real foodie. Sakura turned away to hide her embarrassment. The guy gently added that restraint was a good trait, but one shouldn't forget about rest either. Sakura thanked him. She had been raised in strictness in her hometown, so in Green Track she was able to relax for the first time. She explained that she was still undergoing military training and sometimes only came home for short periods of time. However, she spent most of the year here in Green Grove. She was supposed to leave for home tomorrow. However, this time she planned not just to return, but to take one thing from there. A special material from which she wanted Luke to forge a katana for her. The girl had already seen it in her hands. This meant that he would start working on the weapon after she returned. Sakura apologized for not being able to help with the preparations for the store's opening, but Luke only smiled. He himself had a little surprise in store for her. They said their goodbyes warmly. After a while, a worker installed a sign over the entrance to the store. Luke and Sylvia watched to make sure it hung straight. The new letters gradually formed the name. The store was named White Wolf Grove in honor of Luke's hometown. He could not think of anything closer to his heart. After the installation was completed, the guy thanked Sylvia for her support and help. The girl smiled, saying that she hadn't done anything special. He had saved her life, so now she was just happy for his success. Her sincerity touched Luke. Sylvia was right. Today was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The sun was shining brightly, the wind was swaying the new sign, and it all felt like a real beginning. The preparations were complete, and Luke and Sylvia welcomed their first customers. Thus his shop, the White Wolf Armory, was officially opened, and it was to become his pride. Not much time passed, but the store had already gained popularity. Orders came in one after another, and Luke quickly mastered his new role, a calm and attentive salesman. Standing behind the counter with a friendly smile, he served another customer who was interested in a sword for 1 florin, the standard price for a quality iron blade. Luke thanked the customer for his purchase, and at that moment Sylvia approached him with a bottle in her hands. It was a gift from Merida in honor of the opening of the store. Everyone was in a good mood, celebrating the success. It turned out that Merida also kept a small bar, so this drink was partly from her, as a token of gratitude for her help during the adventures. Luke had not yet sold a single copy of the legendary sword. The price was too high. Only a few could afford such a weapon. The copies hung on the wall, decorating the hall and attracting attention. However, these were only copies. A real sword, the one that defeated the dragon, would have cost a fortune, several sovereigns no less. Hearing this, Sylvia and Sakura only looked at each other in surprise, realizing how great Luke's power and fame now were. After all, the sword cost an average person a year's salary. Luke couldn't just create another one like that would require him to travel back to the Millennium Crossing, where he had found the material. But without an A-rank leader, getting there was nearly impossible. So for now, the boy had no intention of selling or reproducing the legendary weapon. Sylvia thought it was a waste to keep such a sword without any use. But Luke had a different opinion. It was beyond the means of ordinary people to spend that much money on a single sword. But suddenly the door of his shop opened and 2 men entered the hall. One of them had the appearance of a nobleman, the other his silent servant. The one in the long cloak asked who the owner was. The aristocrat immediately recognized the sign. It was here that the legendary sword with which the dragon was destroyed was sold. Luke, a little embarrassed, confirmed. The nobleman immediately announced that he wanted to buy that particular sword. The guy explained that he only had copies that were very similar to the original. But the aristocrat only smiled. He already knew that they were fakes and calmly declared that he was only interested in the real blade. Luke was speechless, not daring to sell the original even for a lot of money. But the buyer had his own reasons for wanting that particular sword. He nodded curtly to the servant, who immediately took from his bag a leather pouch with a jingle of coins. A pile of heavy gold sovereigns fell onto the counter. The surprise froze everyone in the store, including Luke. The gold sparkled so brightly in the light that it made him dizzy. 5 sovereigns lay on the table. Luke was silent, not believing his eyes, and the aristocrat took his silence for displeasure at the price. Therefore, he ordered the amount to be doubled. 5 more coins lay nearby. Now the nobleman looked expectantly at Luke, certain that he would not be able to refuse such a temptation. The boy stood in a stupor, not knowing what to say. Only when all the customers had left did Luke finally breathe a sigh of relief. Fatigue rolled in like a wave. Sylvia, on the other hand, was beaming. She was counting the gold, unable to believe that she was seeing such a sum with her own eyes. Together they had received 10 sovereigns, a sum that the average person would not earn in a few years. Luke suspected that his buyer was not an adventurer, but rather a knight or an envoy of a nobleman. The nobleman was undoubtedly an expert in weapons. He immediately determined the quality of the blade. But why such a person had come to Green Urukishche remained a mystery. And it was at this moment that a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was Sakura. She greeted Luke and Sylvia with a smile. Sylvia, who had been waiting for her return for a long time, joyfully rushed to meet her. The girl apologized. The road to her hometown was delayed. For Luke, it was a pleasant surprise. Sakura returned earlier than he expected. She brought with her the same material she had mentioned earlier and hurried straight to the store without even resting. When all 3 of them sat down at the table, there were already 3 servings of rice with an omelet and hot side dishes, meat and vegetables. The atmosphere was warm, homely. Sakura enjoyed the meal and was full of praise for Sylvia's cooking. She also praised Luke. The shop was flourishing and the number of customers was increasing. Luke even received orders to renovate buildings in the city. His skill in restoring old structures had become well known. Now the shop itself was the best advertisement for his talent. Sakura just smiled. That was exactly what she expected from him. She said he would quickly return all the money he had invested. But Luke surprised her when he calmly replied that he had already done so. The sword with which Sakura defeated the dragon was sold for 10 sovereigns. The girl was shocked. She had never seen such a sum. With this money, she could live comfortably for the rest of her life. But no one knew who had bought the blade. Luke assumed it was a wealthy nobleman who wanted to own a symbol of glory. But that was just speculation. They quickly changed the subject and moved on into discussing the future katana. After dinner, Sakura unwrapped a package with a reddish glow inside. It was a material she had brought from home, a rare metal called scarlatine. She wanted Luke to forge her personal katana from it. Luke had never heard of such a metal. It looked like a gemstone, but it was surprisingly hard and cold, like a real living crystal. Sakura confirmed that this material had unique properties. No one in her hometown knew how to work with scarlet, and even in the eastern lands the knowledge of it had disappeared. It could not be used for armor or ordinary tools. Luke was worried. The girl had entrusted him with an extremely expensive metal. But Sakura was calm, her eyes radiating confidence. She believed only in him. The guy honestly warned that the process would be difficult and time-consuming. His repair skill didn't create things from scratch. It only restored existing items. Creating a sword out of ore was beyond his capabilities. Simply put, it uses the memory of the object to restore its shape. Without the original metal base, it cannot create a blade, only restore it. But if you combine some of the ore with a finished sword and gradually integrate the material into the blade's structure, then the skill could rewrite the object's memory, replacing the metal entirely. This way, he could obtain a katana made of 100% scarlet pure, perfect without impurities. It was a complicated but possible workaround. Hearing these words, Sakura could not hide her joy. Creating a sword from such a material could be a real miracle. Everything seemed simple in theory, but the boy had never tried anything like this. She was impatiently waiting to hold her red blade in her hands. Sakura happily handed Luke her katana. She believed in him without a shadow of a doubt. The guy had to first make the blade half out of scarlet, and only then bring it to 100% purity of the metal. Luke silently accepted the material, feeling both pressure and trust. He began to create a blade from the strange ore. He first split an old katana and a piece of scarlet in half, then activated his skill. A bright glow enveloped both objects, and the process of intertwining the metals began. The girls watched in awe. The blade gradually took on the color of delicate sakura petals, mixing pink hues with the shine of steel. This combination made the weapon look like a work of art. Sakura was beaming with joy. She was eager to try out her new sword right outside. Luke allowed her to, but warned her not to draw too much attention to herself, as the customers might misunderstand. He couldn't help but think that she really had a childlike spontaneity. Meanwhile, Sakura created a tiny flame on her finger, a simple entry-level skill. She couldn't even harm a blade of grass, but she decided to check out the rumors about the metal. It was said that objects from scarlet were capable of conducting fire and enhancing its power. She touched the blade with the flame, and in that instant the blade burst into living fire. The flame did not die out, on the contrary. It seemed to merge with the weapon, pulsing in the rhythm of her breathing. Luke, stunned, watched in fascination. It was the first time he had seen metal interact with magic so naturally. Sakura decided to test the sword in action. She threw a wooden log into the air, and Luke just managed to raise his hand to stop her. But it was too late. With a single swing, the blazing blade sliced through the air, leaving a trail of fire behind it. The wood shattered into dozens of charred fragments. Sylvia froze, and the shopkeepers gasped in surprise. Sakura, beaming with delight, thanked Luke. Her eyes were shining with happiness. For the first time, she felt the true power of the weapon created especially for her. Passers-by stopped, not understanding what had just happened. Luke was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. Sylvia only whispered softly that fire was her low-level skill. The boy suddenly realized he had created perhaps the most dangerous weapon in history. A fiery katana could destroy anything in its path. And if even a simple flame made it so powerful, what would happen if you cast a real, high-level battle spell on it? Luke himself couldn't believe he had managed to create something like that. Not long ago, he was an E-rank adventurer who had been recruited into the hero squad as a mere porter and then left to die. And now he stood before a sword that surpassed legends. It was almost unreal for him. Sylvia praised him enthusiastically, and Sakura, not hiding her emotions, repeated that this weapon was a real miracle. Smiling, the black-haired warrior asked Luke to create a short sword for her to use with her katana. The boy had not expected to hear something so warm. For the first time, he felt pleased that his skill was appreciated, so he happily agreed. He said he would create a perfect match for her blade. Sakura smiled and replied that she trusted him completely. That same evening, Luke said goodbye to the buyers, who had dismantled almost all the weapons. He looked over the list of tasks. Everything was completed, but peace did not come. His hands itched to create again. He was filled with inspiration. He couldn't sit idle and was about to return to the workshop to repair a few more swords. But he remembered. Sakura had asked him to make a short sword. The idea of creating it as a surprise captivated the boy. He decided to slightly change the proportions of the metals and make the blade special. Luke was lost in thought when he suddenly heard a voice speaking to him. Two knights in silver armor stood before him. They asked if he was Luke of White Wolf Grove. The boy was surprised but confirmed. The eldest of them introduced himself as a knight of the Order of the Silver Wings. His tone was formal but not hostile. Luke greeted them cautiously, not understanding what they wanted from him. The second knight, more fiery, suddenly spoke sharply, saying that there was evidence against Luke. The boy did not understand what was being said, but he felt a chill run down his spine. The aggressive knight grabbed him by the collar and called him a criminal. Luke froze in shock, but the other commander stopped him with a shout, ordered him not to do anything stupid. The senior knight, named Felix, sternly reminded his subordinate that he was the commander of the detachment and could report his disobedience. Garnet, that was the name of the hot-tempered knight, stepped back in annoyance. Felix apologized to Luke for his comrade's behavior. Removing his helmet, he introduced himself in full vice commander of the Order of the Silver Wings, Knight Felix Arden. He explained that he had come not to arrest but for a serious conversation. Luke asked warily what would happen if he refused. The other knight coldly replied that then it would be considered resistance to the order. The boy understood that there was no way to avoid the conversation. They decided to go inside the shop so as not to attract attention. Sylvia, seeing the scene, ran over excitedly. She asked what had happened, but Luke himself didn't know anything. He only tried to calm her down, although he felt anxious. The girl saw that the matter was serious. She quickly decided to go to her mother and warn her that Luke was being taken by the knights. The knights did not object to her presence. In fact, Felix asked that Sylvia witness their conversation. He noticed how genuinely concerned she was about Luke, and it made him think about something of his own. A few minutes later, they were in a separate room. One of the knights stood at the door, blocking the exit. Felix solemnly announced that the order had received word of the events in the dungeon, and now they wanted to hear from Luke a description of each member of the hero Falcon squad. Luke began his story. Falcon was overconfident, so proud that he would try to correct any mistake by applying his many skills instead of admitting guilt. His arrogance often put everyone at risk. Julia, a knight and childhood friend of Falcon, was also his lover. She carried out all his orders without question, except when it came to other women, when her rage could overshadow even the sword. The white mage on their team was named Blanca. She was the first to suggest that Luke be expelled. This fair-haired girl had a sharp tongue and liked to provoke people. Everyone in the squad was afraid of her. Luke spoke hesitantly about the last member of the squad. The black-haired sorceress Noir always kept to herself, silent and reserved. She never got into arguments, and Luke didn't even know how to describe her character. Then he cautiously asked why the knights were interested in the team's past. Felix sighed and said bluntly, "Falcon and his companions have disappeared. The Order of the Silver Wings is conducting an investigation to determine their fate." Luke was confused. He explained that when he got out of the dungeon, he immediately informed the guild that the squad was probably left there. But it was this fact, that he was the only survivor, that became the basis for accusations of treason. The minister who funded Falcon as the chosen hero decided that the death of the squad was due to Luke's betrayal of the White Wolf Grove. That is why he is now being questioned. The news stunned the boy. Sylvia, who was standing nearby, could not stand it and exclaimed that this was absurd. Luke was incapable of meanness. Felix tried to calm her down, assuring her that the order was looking for the truth, not the guilty at any cost. It turns out that the ministers also suspect Luke of stealing the hero's weapon, the Dragon Slayer's sword. Therefore, the knights must verify the origin of this legendary weapon. And that's when Luke remembered a familiar buyer. Now everything fell into place. The 10 sovereigns who had paid for the sword were part of a political operation. The minister wanted proof of his version, but now it turned out that it was false. However, a new problem arose. The sword contained mithril. Mithril is a rare, extremely magical metal. Its extraction is strictly controlled by the royal palace. It is strictly forbidden to collect or process mithril without permission. The penalty for violating this law was annihilation without trial. Sylvia looked at Luke in horror, but quickly remembered that he had made the sword from ore mine from the walls of the dungeon, so he might not have known that there was mithril there. If the fabrication was unintentional, he couldn't be blamed. If Luke had indeed reconstructed the sword from the material of the walls, then no one could have predicted that the mithril was hidden there. To prove this, the order demanded that Luke break down the dungeon wall in front of witnesses. The boy agreed without hesitation. He wanted to clear his name. He was only confused by one thing. How could the ministers suspect him of treason when there was a chasm between him and Falcon? Falcon had an A rank and dozens of skills, while Luke was a simple E rank, the owner of one single skill. He noticed that Knight Garnet was looking at him with undisguised hostility. As Felix explained, he simply hated anyone who used mithril illegally, so his contempt had entirely different roots. Finally, the knights announced that they would take Luke to the dungeon to witness the ore mining. Garnet smiled strangely this time, wanting to show his benevolence. But his excessive politeness alarmed Luke. When they shook hands, Garnet squeezed his hands so tightly that Luke winced in pain. The knight's smile was more of a challenge. Luke barely contained his emotions. His hand was burning, but he didn't give vent to his anger. Garnet continued to mutter suspiciously about the culprits. And just then, Sakura, who had just returned, joined the conversation. She said she had received permission from Felix to accompany the group as a guide and bodyguard. Luke thanked her, but apologized for dragging her into his problems. Sakura assured him that she would help him without hesitation. Garnet only chuckled, noting that it was befitting his low rank. Felix immediately stopped his colleague, coldly reminding him that if Garnet continued to speak like that, he would report the breach of discipline to Lord Carmine. The knight angrily fell silent, but then he raised his eyebrows in surprise. Luke had accidentally called Cartman Felix's older brother. Garnet hadn't expected Cartman to notice such a small detail. The guy just shrugged, saying that he was used to noticing details. Otherwise, an E-rank adventurer wouldn't survive. At that moment, one of the guards announced that the vice commander was ready to leave. The group headed to the Millennium Crossing, where the Order's men were already waiting for them. The remains of a dragon lay along the road. Even the knights were stunned. How could they not notice such a creature? Luke joked that perhaps that was why Garnet was in full armor, in case the dragon appeared again. The dragon flared up with rage and exclaimed that he was not afraid of any monsters. Luke just shrugged and said that now we could rest easy. There were no rumors of a new dragon. Garnet gritted his teeth, and the rest of the group looked away uncomfortably. Soon they reached the entrance to the dungeon, Thousand-Year Passage to Hell. Knights and researchers who were supposed to record the experiment were already standing around. It turned out that this dungeon was indeed connected to the others. To confirm Luke's point, they needed to check the lower levels as well. The boy pointed to the stone wall near the stairs. It was from the ore of these walls that he had once restored a sword. It looked ordinary, gray, but had an unusual weight. Felix noted that the walls of the dungeons were practically indestructible, which was why he had brought Garnet with him. He, grimacing, said that if Luke managed to destroy the wall, it would be proof of his lie. But the boy calmly looked up. There was neither fear nor doubt in him. Garnet, not hiding his self-confidence, moved toward the stone wall that needed to be checked. His armor clanged as he activated his skill. A powerful aura flared around him. He swung his foot at the wall, hoping to shatter it into pieces. The sound of the explosion echoed through the dungeon, but the wall didn't even flinch. Not a scratch, as if what he was facing wasn't stone, but solid steel. It turned out that the ore's resemblance to ordinary stone was only superficial. Inside, it was a solid layer of metal. Even an A-rank hero would not be able to penetrate such a thickness. Therefore, the knights were forced to turn to Luke. The boy felt the weight of the past returning memories of the darkest period of his life. He wanted to finish the job and get out of here as quickly as possible. Taking a deep breath, Luke activated his skill. At that moment, the surface of the wall lit up. The gray rock began to crack as if it had come to life. Under the pressure of the skill, cracks appeared, radiating from the center, leaving a deep mark in the solid wall of the dungeon. Felix and the others watched in amazement as the boy demolished a section of the wall without any physical impact. The stones crumbled away, revealing a shiny layer of ore. Luke calmly connected the fragment to his sword, demonstrating exactly how his skill worked. Soon the sword absorbed the properties of this ore, and its surface began to glow with a dim light. Luke explained that this was how he had created the blade with which he had once defeated a dragon, without knowing what metal he had used at the time. Felix ordered his subordinate Bradford to collect samples of the ore from the wall, and then asked Luke to repeat the experiment in several other places to verify the composition of the material. This request did not make the boy happy. Luke reluctantly agreed. He didn't want to go near those walls again, but to verify the truth, he needed to get samples from different areas. Without proof, he wouldn't be believed. Garnet sneered, implying that the boy was afraid. But everyone could see how hard he was breathing. The dungeon inspired him with disgust and fear. Despite this, Luke activated his skill again, and sparks rained down from the stone. As they filled several bags with material, Luke finally breathed a sigh of relief. The air of this place seemed to him stifling and heavy, like the very past from which he had finally escaped. Garnet grunted in surprise that the boy had managed to spend 2 weeks here without going crazy. Luke smiled bitterly. At that time, he simply had no other choice but to fight for his life. Now the knights had to deliver the mind ore for analysis. Felix said it might take a while, but he promised to report the results immediately. Luke thanked him when suddenly someone called Felix by name. It was Sakura. She cheerfully offered to take some of the dragon's remains with her. They said it would be a wonderful souvenir for the order. Garnet just waved it away in annoyance. He wanted to get out of the dungeon as soon as possible. Luke asked him if he remembered the way back. Garnet irritably blurted out something inappropriate, and at the same moment a giant shadow fell over him. The next moment, the monster's massive paw fell on him. Luke didn't even have time to react. It all happened in a split second. Shards of armor scattered across the ground, and the enormous body of a dragon loomed before them. Its scales gleamed with a dark metallic sheen, and other winged creatures were already circling overhead. The dragon's roar echoed through the cave like thunder. Luke saw Garnet's body fall to the ground and ran toward him with a scream. Chaos erupted all around. People screamed in terror as wyverns rained down on them from the sky. Fire and ash filled the air. Adventurers and knights dropped everything and fled, realizing they were powerless against these creatures. Felix, without losing his composure, called out to Bradford. Bradford responded instantly, activating his skill. A blue glow illuminated his hands. Long chains appeared in the air, reaching out as if alive to the wyverns. The 3 creatures were immediately trapped, bound by the chains, and fell to the ground, roaring with rage. Using his skill, Bradford pulled them down with a jerk. In one motion, he knocked down 3 monsters. Luke was stunned. The knight's strength was incredible. And just then, Sakura lunged forward. She leapt up like lightning and landed squarely on the wyvern's back. It faltered, but the girl instantly pulled out her katana. Her blade flared with red flames, cutting the monster apart with a single blow. Without wasting any time, Sakura flew towards the second wyvern. 2 quick swings and another creature fell before it could even roar. Her movements were as precise as a dance. Upon landing, the girl saw a new enemy in front of her. A massive wyvern that was twice her size. Luke screamed, trying to warn her of the danger, but the monster had already opened its mouth, preparing to unleash a stream of fire. And just then, Felix appeared next to Sakura. He activated his skill, creating a glowing magical barrier in front of them. The flames hit the shield, but it held. Sakura thanked the knight, and he replied seriously that this wyvern was special. It possessed true dragon breath. Therefore, he and Bradford would provide her with cover, and she should deliver the decisive blow. Felix ordered Luke to move to a safe distance. The boy did not object and obediently retreated. He felt powerless. His skills would not help in this battle. A feeling of helplessness tore at him inside, but gritting his teeth, he decided to at least help those who were injured. Noticing Garnet's body, Luke rushed to him. The knight lay unconscious, his armor all crumpled, his face mangled, but he was still breathing. Luke carefully lifted him up, trying to stop the bleeding. A thought crossed his mind. Maybe try using the skill on the body, but before he could act, a deafening roar erupted above them, and a stream of flame erupted from the dragon's mouth. Luke looked up and realized with horror that a wave of fire was rushing straight at them. If they didn't move, they would be caught in the flames. Luke realized that he could have dodged in time, but Garnet couldn't. It all looked hopeless. And suddenly an idea flashed through his mind. If he channeled his power into the ore from the dungeon, some of which he had once combined with the sword, and used the earth as a conductor, it might work. The boy immediately activated his skill. The next moment, a stone shell rose around them, a makeshift shield of ore, metal, and earth. The dragon's flames crashed into it, bursting into a flash, but they couldn't reach them. Lying in silence, Luke felt a bitter feeling rise in his chest. He himself had once been abandoned as useless, and now he couldn't repeat the same thing to someone who was defenseless. As the fire died down, the defense began to crumble. The boy was barely breathing from exhaustion, but he was glad that the plan had worked. It was the first time he had used his skill in such a different way. Then Luke placed his hand on the wounded knight and directed his power to repair the flesh, as if mending metal. The tissues of the body began to close. The blood stopped. He even thought that after this, Garnet might apologize for his rudeness. A few minutes passed, and the wounds disappeared. Luke breathed a sigh of relief until he noticed something strange. The body of the knight he was treating did not look male at all. His eyes widened in shock. There was a girl hiding under the armor. Garnet opened her eyes and, not understanding what had happened, stood up abruptly, shouting about the dragon. She tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't hold. Luke grabbed her by the shoulders and said alarmedly that she couldn't move. The wounds had healed, but she still didn't have the strength. The girl touched the spot where the wound had recently been, and at that moment she realized that the boy had seen something he shouldn't have seen. Luke looked away, confused. Her cry echoed through the cave. Garnet's face turned red with shame and anger. She knew he was innocent, but she was too humiliated to say a word. Luke cautiously suggested restoring her armor so she could hide. Garnet turned away silently, still confused. The boy activated the skill and touched the broken armor. The metal came to life, returning to its original form. Luke thought that the name Garnet was indeed ambiguous. He would never have guessed that a woman was hiding under it. When the armor was reconnected, they both waited in silence for the battle to end. Screams and roars could be heard in the distance as Sakura and the others finished off the dragon. Garnet calmed down a bit, but she remained confused. She wondered why Luke didn't ask her why she was hiding her gender. But he understood that if she was silent, she had a good reason, and he didn't press her. His calm words struck the girl. She called out to him loudly, and Luke, not understanding the reason, turned to her. Garnet lowered her head and apologized for her rudeness. She knew she had been unfair. Luke just nodded, thinking she had simply mistaken him for a mithril smuggler. The girl was surprised to learn that he knew about it, and embarrassedly admitted that she would not make excuses. If her mother found out that she was still so proud, she would probably scold her. Then she bowed her head again and thanked him. If it weren't for Luke, she would have died long ago. Her sincerity struck the boy. He hadn't expected such words from her. He replied simply, "I did what I had to do." But with an embarrassed smile, he added that perhaps I saw more than I should have. Garnet froze in place. The next moment she grabbed him by the collar and shouted furiously to him to forget everything he had seen. Luke blinked in confusion. He had meant only her face, but he didn't have time to explain. At that moment, a powerful roar shook the dungeon. The dragon was destroyed. Felix and Sakura managed. Garnet, although relieved, was angry that she could not take revenge herself. They decided to return to the group. Luke held out his hand to help her up. Garnet was at first confused, not knowing how to react, but the boy insisted. Finally, she waved it off and stood up on her own, proudly declaring that she could stand without help. Luke only sighed softly. She was obviously offended. He was worried. The helmet was gone, and if anyone saw her face, the secret would be revealed. However, Felix and Bradford had already seen her without the helmet, but they had no idea what her true gender was. After all, there was an ancient law in the Order. Women were forbidden to enter. Luke remembered how Felix had called Garnet the commander's little brother. She had perpetuated this legend, risking everything. He had promised himself never to reveal her secret. The guy understood. She must have had a very good reason to join the Order, and if she made such a sacrifice, he would respect it. Although he wanted to ask, he refrained. Suddenly, Garnet stopped abruptly and pointed to the side, a look of terror flashing in her eyes. A giant hole darkened on the rise. Previously, it had not been visible because of the thick ivy vines that blocked the passage. A tense silence fell. Everyone felt something huge erupt from there as they descended into the cave. And if the dragon was just the beginning, what emerged from that abyss could be a real nightmare. Garnet felt cold. Something even more terrible could have come out of that abyss. It was probably where the same dragon that attacked in the Sun Forest had once climbed out. The guild hadn't even noticed this dangerous opening. They realized that they had to immediately report their discovery to the guild. But before they could say a word, the hole began to close, the heavy stone slabs slowly closing together like the jaws of a monster. It was a typical dungeon trap mechanism, but its presence here meant one thing. The dragon was part of this trap. Luke realized that it could be controlled. Someone was controlling the monster from the outside. If his guess was correct, there must be a lever or magical knot somewhere nearby that would trigger the mechanism. But before he could look around, Garnet called his name. Her voice was filled with terror. She saw something down near the rise a human body. Luke realized that Garnet couldn't run yet, and he rushed there himself. His heart pounded as he descended to the foot of the hill. At the foot of the hill, he leaned over the figure, trying to see if she was alive. The girl was still breathing. When Luke saw her face, his blood froze in his veins. He recognized her as a familiar face. It was Noir, a dark-haired sorceress, a former companion in the hero Falcon squad. Shocked, Luke asked what had happened, but the girl could not utter a word. Her eyes filled with tears. She stood up abruptly and crying embraced him. Her voice trembled with despair. She begged forgiveness for having abandoned him once. Tears flowed down her cheeks, mingling with the dust of the dungeon. Luke quietly said he accepted her apology and asked her to explain what had happened to her. Noir replied in a trembling voice that the rest of the team was still somewhere down in the dungeon. But then something invisible squeezed her throat. She screamed in pain. The sorceress grabbed her neck. Dark energy engulfed her body, and a hoarse voice rang out in her mind. "Shut up, or you will die." She was bound by the black seal of the curse. Noir fainted from the pain. Luke carefully lowered her to the ground. A dark mark pulsed on her back, the sign of a demonic curse. He knew it might be impossible to free her from it. Time passed and the girl finally came to her senses. In front of her, she saw three people: Felix, Sakura, and Luke. Of all three, she only knew him. The others watched carefully as she slowly opened her eyes. Noir warily asked who they were. Felix introduced himself as a Knight of the Order of the Silver Wings and explained that he was investigating the disappearance of the hero Falcon on behalf of the Royal Order. He asked her to tell him everything she remembered. The girl was silent, then whispered wearily that she would show, not tell. She turned away and took off her outer clothing. On her back, everyone saw a black seal with a crimson glow. Luke was stunned. Felix recognized the symbol immediately, the devil's curse of submission. He had heard of spells that forced silence or obedience. The sign was apparently blocking her attempts to talk about certain events. Felix had a thought. Perhaps Luke could remove the seal with his ability to restore. And although Noir's guilt towards him was great, now was not the time for insults. Lives were at stake. They summed up. First there was a dragon in a strange hole in the Sun Forest. Now there was a cursed sorceress. So the city was under real threat. Luke agreed to help without hesitation. Before that, he warned Noir. His skill had developed. Now he was able to not only heal but also destroy. If he did something wrong, he could kill her instantly. The girl turned pale but nodded. Sakura wanted to intervene, but Felix stopped her, saying that she couldn't interfere right now. Everyone watched intently as Luke placed a hand on her back. The cursed mark trembled, flashing a dark light. Noir flinched, but Luke didn't pull his hand away, directing the flow of power directly into the center of the curse. Suddenly, a black goo erupted from the mark and wrapped around his hand. Luke felt the creature sucking his magic. It wasn't just a curse, it was alive. Felix and Sakura were stunned. A creature resembling a mimic materialized before them, a parasite that usually pretends to be a treasure chest or a door. But for the first time, they had seen a mimic in the form of a curse. Luke had no time to think. The magical creature was absorbing more and more of his power. The boy gritted his teeth, reactivated the skill, and directed the energy directly into his own hand. A stream of light pierced the mimic. The creature screamed, writhing, retreated. But Luke clenched his fist, concentrating the remnants of energy in one place. With a dull flash, he struck, and the mimic scattered into dust. The mark on Noir's back faded. The air in the cave darkened, then fell silent. The curse was broken. Exhausted, Noir fell helplessly onto the makeshift bed. Her chest barely rose, but she was alive. Felix and Sakura breathed a sigh of relief. They realized that even a moment of hesitation could cost them all their lives. For adventurers, losing their guard meant death. But the danger has not gone away. The truth lies ahead. Felix has ordered to find out everything possible from Noir, because the threat to the city could be much closer than it seemed. Gathering her strength, Noir began to tell the story. The day after they banished Luke, the group reached the deepest level of the dungeon. The hero Falcon spoke the password that opened a hidden passage. The passage opened before them like the mouth of a monster. Falcon ordered Noir to use magic to check if the path was safe. She obediently followed the order, and that's when something happened that she never wanted to remember. Before them lay a gigantic cavern, like an entire underworld. On its outskirts stretched mines where exhausted dwarves worked under the supervision of dark elves. In the far depths, the land was dead and empty, inhabited by dragons, the true masters of this abyss. Somewhere along this path, they were to come across a small settlement. It was there, according to the king's order, that the gray-haired elder they were to find lived. 2 months ago, the dwarves' leader asked the king for help, so the king sent the hero Falcon with a detachment to find out what was happening. They decided to go through the deserted lands to avoid being seen by the dark elves. Along the way, Julia noticed a massive door nearby, so large that even a giant couldn't open it on his own. Falcon tried activating the mechanism with the password, but nothing happened, so they moved on. The next day they reached the town they wanted. It looked as if only dwarves lived there. Noir cast an invisibility spell on the group, and the group cautiously set off towards the mayor. Near the town hall, they were met by a white, gray-bearded dwarf, the village elder. He greeted the hero with respect, because the hope of his people rested only on him. The elder told that the dark elves had suddenly appeared and made the dwarves slaves. He begged the hero to save them, but Falcon was not impressed by this. His eyes shone with self-confidence, not compassion. He declared that with one swing of his sword he would destroy all enemies. Noir shuddered. Their mission was only reconnaissance. Going directly against the dark elves would mean suicide. Blanca, Noir's sister, noticed the worry on her face, but she did not share her suspicions. She felt that this expedition would end in disaster. The headman promised to show them a secret passage to the dark elf fortress. Noir woke up at night to a soft moan. When she came out of the tent, she saw Julia spending the night with Falcon again. They had seemed to be a couple even before the formation of the squad. But now, as they stood a few steps away from the enemy, their debauchery seemed contemptuous to Noir. She was ashamed. Tomorrow they were going to storm the fortress, and the hero was behaving like a carefree boy. His self-confidence was blind. Noir's mind flashed with the image of Luke, the one they had betrayed. He also warned of the hero's pride, which would one day destroy them. Recalling the betrayal, Noir felt a burning shame. Her thoughts were interrupted by Sister Blanca, who decided that Noir was spying on Julia and the hero. But Noir denied it. She just thought about it. Blanca brushed it off, saying she didn't understand what Julia saw in him, a boastful braggart who reveled in his own fame. But she added with a smile, "At least he's talented, unlike the nothing Luke." Hearing that name, Noir clenched her fists in guilt, and Blanca noticed it. Blanca walked over to her sister, put her hand on her shoulder, and quietly told her that Luke wasn't worth her tears. But Noir knew he was worth much more than their betrayal. The next morning they approached the dark fortress. Falcon walked forward with a smile, full of confidence. Blanca stayed close by, showing off her magic. Having reached the hidden entrance that the elder had shown them, they prepared for the attack. The goal was to destroy the dark elf lord. When Falcon opened the door, the ground beneath his feet trembled. A huge stone golem, imbued with dark magic, rose before them. Noir recognized it with horror. It was a golem created to destroy the heroes. But Falcon did not hesitate. With a scream, he flew into the air, and with one sweeping blow cut the monster in half. The chests of the squad filled with false hope, but in a moment, new creatures appeared around them. Dozens of golems and groups of dark elves. The heroes did not have time to recover, as they found themselves surrounded. The headman betrayed them. The gate, which was supposed to be a secret passage, turned out to be a trap. The battle was hopeless. With each wave of enemies, there were more and more of them. Falcon tried to repair his sword, but with each blow, the blade cracked more and more. Noir remembered how Luke always added materials when repairing, and realized that without it, the sword would only weaken. She felt a coldness in her chest as their weapons lost power, and Falcon's arrogance only grew. The foreboding of disaster became unbearable. Finally, they reached the throne room, and the Dark Lord sat before them. Their goal was right in front of them. The Lord of the Dark Elves, King Gandalf, stood up, surprised by the audacity of the small band that dared to penetrate his stronghold. But Falcon, without bowing his head, challenged him. He did not intend to listen to speeches, only to fight. His sword shone with a bright golden glow. The king smiled grimly. His patience was running out. Raising his hand, he whispered an ancient spell, and a dark wave of magic struck in the direction of the detachment. Noir had time to react. She set up a barrier that took the blow. The stream of magic scattered in sparks, dissolving in the air. But Gandalf did not become angry. On the contrary, his smile grew wider. "Interesting," he said. "Entertain me, children of the royal order." Falcon only clutched his sword, confident in his victory, not realizing that the real nightmare was only beginning. Suddenly, a dark elf knight stood before the throne. He asked his lord for permission to duel with the hero, and Gandalf nodded silently. Falcon grimaced. He was sorry to fight not with the king, but with a second-rate servant. With fury, he raised his sword and rushed forward. But when his blade touched the elf's sword, there was a dry crack. The hero's blade split in two, and the shining shard fell to the floor. Falcon froze, his eyes filled with horror. His legendary sword broke instantly. The Dark Knight laughed, watching his confusion. "Your glory is not worth even this shard," he said mockingly, enjoying the humiliation of his enemy. The hero stood as pale as chalk. Before he could regain his senses, the elf made a swift leap and swung his sword. A black spark flashed in his eyes, and the blade flew at incredible speed straight into the hero's chest. At that moment, Julia rushed between them. She covered Falcon with her body, and the blow fell on her back. A scream rang out over the hall, echoing off the walls of the throne room. The hero, in horror, grabbed the girl in his arms. Julia was barely breathing, her body bleeding. She whispered to him to take her sword and finish the fight. Her eyes were slowly fading, but their faith in her lover still flickered. The guard laughed. "How noble! I'll even let you raise your weapon." Falcon, furious with rage, raised Julia's sword, and a new furious battle erupted in the hall. But the hero's strength was quickly leaving him. His blows grew weaker until the sword slipped from his hands. Gandalf easily intercepted him, grabbed Falcon by the neck, and lifted him high above the floor. His fallen comrades lay around him. The king looked at the fragment of the broken sword with cold curiosity. "It is interesting," he said, "that to get here you had to crush my golems, and yet you came to me with this toy." He explained that the sword had failed because it had been repaired so many times without the proper materials. The blades simply could not withstand their force any longer. Falcon, barely breathing, rose from the floor. "You're wrong. We haven't lost yet," he croaked, clenching his fists. His voice trembled with helplessness. The hero asked angrily if Gandalf thought they would have won if Luke had been there. The king smiled coldly. "Nonsense. Bring him here," he ordered. But Falcon tried to resist. Noir, half conscious, heard the name and realized that if Luke had been with them, things might have been different. She raised her head and saw the king approaching her. His touch ignited a flame of pain. Noir screamed as black magic coursed through her body, binding her consciousness. Gandalf coldly ordered her to remain silent unless she wanted to suffer even more. He then placed a curse mark on her and ordered her locked up with Julia and Blanca. Falcon was taken away separately. His fate remained unknown. They were given some food and left in a cramped cell. The air was stuffy, the darkness oppressive. The girls sat in silence, not daring even to look at each other. Julia was taken away first. She screamed, demanding to know where Falcon was being held, but the guards didn't answer. Her screams died away behind the door. Then they came for Blanche. Noir tried to intervene but was pushed away. She watched helplessly as her sister was led into the darkness, only whispering her name. None of them returned. When they came for Noir, she fell to her knees, realizing that she wouldn't get out of here alive either. The guards ordered her to stand up, and suddenly everything shook. The dungeon shuddered. The walls shook. Noir instinctively closed her eyes. The guards looked at each other in fear. They ran out, leaving the girl alone. This was her only chance. Without thinking, she rushed to run down the corridor, barely able to stand on her feet. She used up the last of her magic to hide in the shadows. Her path lay through the Dragonlands. She ran until she reached the exit to the upper levels of the dungeon. But there was a guard standing at the entrance. Noir's magical energy had run out. Her body was shaking from fatigue. She could no longer break through. She cried, staring into the void, when suddenly the wind blew, and the familiar door, the same giant gate, opened before her. Having no choice, she rushed towards it. Climbing the steep slope, the girl felt like each step was a last-ditch effort. Finally, a light flashed ahead. She stepped outside, fell, and laughed quietly through her tears. She was free. Her body ached, but her soul sang. She whispered an apology to her sister for not being able to save her. And when consciousness had already faded, she heard voices. Squinting her eyes, she saw a familiar silhouette. Luke, the one she no longer expected to meet. As Noir slept, Luke stood by, confused, not knowing where to start. Felix suggested that they seek help from the king. Luke was surprised that the knight trusted him. Felix replied, "You saved Garnet." Sylvia ran up to them, excited. She asked Luke to step aside for a moment. Her face went pale. "It's urgent," she said, barely able to catch her breath. Meanwhile, panic was growing in the city. People said they could not withstand another dragon attack. Merchants asked with fear what would happen to their shops if all the adventurers left the city. One of the merchants exclaimed angrily that after the clashes with the dragons, the number of visitors to the hot springs had dropped sharply, and now their business was in decline. If the guild did not intervene immediately, the entire town could lose its profits and peace. Luke, Sylvia, and Trace enter the guild hall. They see poor Merida surrounded by a crowd of angry adventurers, trying to explain something. When she sees Luke, she sighs in relief and asks for help to resolve the situation. She explains that after the dragons appeared, the villagers panicked and the guildmaster disappeared. Luke hears the complaints. Most of the local seekers are only E rank, and for them, meeting a dragon means certain death. Luke tries to calm the crowd. He says that everything is under control and that reinforcements will arrive from the palace soon, so there is no need to panic. His voice is confident, but the people are slow to believe. The townspeople shout indignantly in response, asking what to do while help is still on the way. Some suggest evacuation, but the shopkeepers protest. Without customers, they will lose everything. The dispute heats up more and more. Luke sees the argument spiraling into chaos. He doesn't want Green Hollow to be destroyed by his own panic. His heart sinks. This is his hometown, where every shop, every rooftop is painfully familiar. Then he decides to do what he has been trying to avoid. He loudly calls everyone to silence and says that he has been an adventurer for 15 years, although his rank has remained low. During that time, he has made many acquaintances and will now try to reach out to his old allies. He names Dustin of the Two Prisons, Roy of the Predatory Plains, Travis of Blackblade Ridge, and Theodore Beaufort, the legendary dragon slayer. His words stir up a wave of whispers. These are names even children know. Sylvia leans into Merida, asking who these people are. She whispers that they are all A-rank adventurers, the true elite of the adventure world. Luke sighs, remembering how many people once looked down on him. Yet among them were those who recognized him as a friend. They are the ones who can now help save Green Gables. He says that these heroes will primarily support newcomers and maybe even teach them something. Don't miss the chance to see how real masters work, he adds, looking at the adventurers. Luke then turns to Merida, telling her that they must guard the 5th level of the dungeon until reinforcements arrive. He asks if the guildmaster mentioned this. Merida takes the hint and replies that, of course, it is, and the most active will receive the reward. Luke adds that the chief promised to introduce the proactive warriors to the highest adventurers. After these words, the hall explodes with enthusiasm. People begin to shout that they are ready to participate in the mission. Luke smiles with relief. Panic has given way to determination. Finally, he sits down in a chair, and Sylvia hands him a glass of water. "You must be terribly tired," she says with a warm smile. Luke thanks her, feeling the tension ease. He takes a sip and asks if it's really that obvious that he's exhausted. He admits that he wouldn't want to ask old friends for help because it would be a painful step for him. "It means remembering the past," he explains. "They've all become successful, and I'm still nothing. To them, I'm probably just a burden, a reminder of past failures." Sylvia looks him straight in the eye and says quietly, "Even if they do, they still need you, and so do we." She adds that his actions, while seemingly small, have a big impact on those around him. "Don't think of yourself as a failure, Luke. You are the heart of this city. We are all grateful to you." He thinks about it. He says he feels stuck. He opened a shop, but he can't forget his past life as an adventurer. Between two worlds, he doesn't know where he belongs. "It's like I'm standing between a rock and a hard place," he sighs, "and I can't choose whether to keep fighting or stay here." Sylvia gently says that now he doesn't have to choose at all. She reminds us that Green Hollow has always been a refuge for weary hearts. People come here not for solutions, but to find peace. And this is also a path. Many people come home happy from here, she adds, because this is where they first stopped running. Luke smiles. I guess it's some kind of miracle. But Sylvia objects. Not a miracle, but a simple human rest. When you can't go any further, just stop. Then, she says with a smile, you'll see the way from the other side. And maybe you'll find the answer you've been looking for. Luke thanks her. Her warm smile dispels his fatigue. He understands that sometimes he needs to allow himself to rest. But he doesn't have time to catch his breath when he hears his name. A group of adventurers approaches him and thanks him for his support. One of the shopkeepers says that he was also afraid for his shop, but now he believes in the future of the city again. A moment later, a whole crowd of adventurers runs up to Luke, all curious to hear more about those legendary warriors he mentioned. Sylvia laughs as she watches as people surround Luke. It seems like you've become a local star, she jokes. Luke realizes that this is no time to be sad. His mission is to restore these people's faith. The next morning, Luke's shop is packed with customers. Sylvia is surprised that even after all the misfortunes of the guild, the townspeople are still queuing up for weapons. Everyone is preparing for the upcoming battle, and Luke feels like he is once again at the center of events. Together with Sylvia, Luke and Sakura work tirelessly in the shop. While carrying another heavy box, Luke apologized to Sakura for asking for help. She just smiled cheerfully, saying that she was even happy to do it, and asked her not to be ashamed to rely on her. Despite the efforts of the three, the work seemed endless. Luke knew perfectly well that if everything continued to move so slowly, the shop might go bankrupt before the end of the month. Every day became a struggle against time and fatigue. He was carrying another box to the shelf when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Look, you've got it going, Luke, someone said with a slight sneer. A cold sweat ran down his back. He recognized the timbre. Turning around, Luke saw the one he least expected. Garnet standing in the doorway, fully armored, her shining helmet hiding her face. Her posture, as usual, was straight and proud, as if she had just returned from a campaign. Luke grumbled angrily that he didn't have time to chat while he was working. But Garnet replied indignantly that she didn't have time either. Felix had only given her the day off because he didn't want to risk the commander's relative, so she had come to complain to him. Taking a closer look, Luke asked if she was okay after her injuries. She proudly replied that she had fully recovered, as if nothing had happened. Then that's great, he replied, and abruptly thrust a large box into her hands. Put this on the shelf. Garnet, stunned, could barely hold the weight and exclaimed that it was too heavy, but obediently followed the order. I'm being forced to work, she muttered. Luke shrugged. There aren't enough hands. If we can do it faster, we'll talk. Sakura confirmed his words, pointing to the long line behind the counter. Behind the counter, Sylvia was serving customers without a break. Seeing this, Garnet realized that she couldn't refuse anymore. Even her pride couldn't withstand the force of the arguments. Finally, she sighed and agreed to help. Luke immediately pointed to the other boxes, and Sakura happily asked to join her later. When Garnet finished another task, she asked displeasedly if she could now join the union. When the work had calmed down a bit, Sylvia thanked Garnet with relief. We couldn't have done it without you. We really need male strength. Luke didn't immediately get the hint, but he fell silent. Garnet moved closer and imperceptibly elbowed him in the stomach. Luke understood immediately and confirmed Sylvia's words, barely suppressing a smile. When the line finally cleared, Sylvia insisted that Luke take a break. Sakura and I can handle it, she said confidently. Luke agreed, seeing how confidently the girls were getting down to business. He turned to Garnet. Now I have a minute. We can talk. That's what you came for, right? She nodded, although there was irritation in her voice at the long wait. Sighing, she took off her helmet. A blush rose to her face and a bead of sweat rolled down her cheek. It's so hot, she grumbled. Luke only now realized how difficult it must be for her in the armor. He was the only one who knew her true secret. The realization made him feel embarrassed, especially when Garnet began to unbutton the top of her armor. His cheeks instantly flushed. He turned away and muttered quietly, Maybe you should have changed before coming here. But Garnet replied seriously, I'm not changing. I want you to look. And grabbing the thin fabric of her shirt, she tore it at the chest, revealing a small spot of skin. Luke, confused, looked at her, not understanding what was wrong. I can't see anything. Did I do something wrong when I treated you? But Garnet replied with concentration, On the contrary, everything is correct. And that's the problem. Her words stunned him. She asked for the marks he had erased with his skill to be restored. At first he thought they were the wounds from the dragon, but he quickly realized they weren't. Garnet explained that before the dragon attacked, she had scars on her chest that his power had erased. She wanted him to bring them back. Luke, scratching the back of his head in confusion, replied that it was theoretically possible, although very difficult. Hearing these words, Garnet came closer. Her gaze became serious and firm. "Please try." Luke, embarrassed, realized that he could not refuse. Turning away from her gaze, he said, "I guess it's a badge of honor for you, isn't it?" She thought for a moment, then quietly agreed. Luke could tell that Garnet didn't want to explain further. He simply asked if she was ready. She nodded. "Remember the moment you received that wound and focus on the feeling?" he asked softly. He explained that his ability could restore things from memories. "If you can recall the past clearly enough, I can recreate the scar." Garnet closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'll start," Luke said, placing his hand gently on her chest. At that moment, a vision flashed before his eyes. Everything around him was engulfed in flames. A woman ran through the flames, clutching the hand of a little girl. She gasped in fear as she tried to pull the child out of the fire. A column fell ahead, blocking her path. A man with a sword emerged from the shadows of the fire, his face hidden in the darkness. The little girl froze, watching as the blade flashed. The mother covered her with herself. The sword pierced her back, and warm blood splashed on the girl. The child screamed, trembling with terror, hugging her mother, who no longer moved. Luke opened his eyes and saw Garnet standing before him. A small scar had appeared on her chest under her collar. He said quietly, "It seems to have worked." Garnet looked down and smiled broadly. "Yes, that's how he was back then," she said with relief. There was gratitude in her voice and something deeper, as if she had finally regained a piece of her past. Luke, however, looked worried. What he had seen in the vision could not be erased from his mind. He guessed that perhaps these were fragments of memories that his skill had accidentally read. And the woman from the fire was probably Garnet's mother. Meanwhile, the girl whispered that she had also remembered something. Then Garnet got down to business and told him that she had a message for him from Felix. She said that the order had made a decision about him, and now Luke should report to the guild after the shop closed. Luke was surprised. It all sounded too formal. Sighing, he noted irritably that he should have started the conversation with that, not with the strange scars. Garnet replied in the same tone, "The main thing is that I said it anyway." Then, as if hesitating, she added that she had remembered something else. Luke, a little irritated, said, "Then tell me." Instead of answering, she put on her armor, took her helmet under her arm, and unexpectedly, for Luke smiled warmly. "Thank you for your help." He was a little moved by these words. He had been expecting another storm, and instead he received simple human gratitude. The next day, Luke arrived at the guild as agreed. He was met by the Knights of the Order and escorted to Felix. There was a tense silence in the room. Luke asked why he had been summoned, and Felix immediately apologized for the urgency. Luke said that Garnet had explained that the royal palace had made a decision in just 3 days. Felix corrected him, "In 1?" Luke frowned. "And what does that mean?" Instead of answering, Felix placed an envelope on the table, sealed with red wax and bearing the royal palace emblem. Luke's gaze involuntarily lingered on the seal. "So what is this?" he asked. Felix explained that within a week the king himself would decide what to do, and the letter would contain the detailed terms. Luke felt the tension slowly tighten in his chest. He felt uneasy. He knew that working with Mithril required the monarch's permission, but he hadn't thought he would be summoned personally. But Felix added that there was another errand. His face became serious. "His Majesty wants you to fulfill a special request." The words sounded almost like an order. He unfolded the drawing. It showed a sword embedded in stone, and behind it a massive block engraved with symbols. Luke understood the plan immediately. The king wanted a sword that no one could pull from its pedestal. It seemed strange to him, almost a childish request, especially after everything that had happened. At first, it even seemed funny to him. "I'm just being summoned to the king, and they're already conjuring up fairy sword," he muttered. But in the end, he decided to see the work as a way to distract himself from his worries. Later, he was sitting on a stump near a bench when Garnet landed behind him. "Oh, I almost missed," she said. Luke jumped in surprise, almost dropping the drawing. "I understand that guarding me is boring," he muttered, "but please don't blow my roof off." Garnet snorted. The Knights of the Order of the Silver Wings had been taking turns watching him for weeks. Garnet replied that inactivity makes you weak, so she asked Sakura to practice with her. She ran over, apologizing to Luke, and leaned over to examine the drawings. Luke just sighed. There would be no peace with them. When Garnet leaned closer, Luke blushed, but he focused on his work. "You're right," he said. "It's time to start." He knew perfectly well that there was no room for silence around these two. Garnet asked curiously how he planned to create a sword that no one could pull out. Sakura, wiping away her sweat from her training, leaned closer as well. Luke explained that he would simply fuse the blade and the stone together so that they became one. To demonstrate, he took a regular knife and a piece of stone. Activating the skill, he spread both objects out and fused them together, forming a blade that was firmly grown into the stone. Sakura tried to pull it out, but in vain. "It really doesn't move," she exclaimed. Garnet looked at her in shock. "Your skill can really do that?" Luke replied that he had simply stopped the fusion process in the middle. Now the stone and the blade were inseparable. Garnet, folding her arms, said that few people start work before the audience. "Aren't you nervous?" she asked. Luke smiled. "I am, but work helps you not to think about it." Sakura, looking at them both with curiosity, suddenly asked, "And who is your king? I've never seen him." Luke remembered that she had come from the East, so she might indeed know little about their country. Garnet explained that over the past 20 years, King Alfred has united most of the Western lands, and his influence is still growing. Previously, this territory was called the Westlands, but after the unification, they became the Kingdom of Westlands. Thanks to him, the internecine strife ended, and the country finally gained unity. Luke respectfully added that their king had once been a simple adventurer. Sakura's eyes widened, amazed at the thought that a simple warrior could rise to the pinnacle of power. Luke quoted an old proverb, "Only he who can retrieve the artifact from the depths of the dungeon is worthy of becoming a ruler." It was by fulfilling this condition that Alfred gained the right to the throne. Sakura turned to Garnet with admiration. "Is this true?" She nodded. "Yes, this story is well known." Then a little more sternly, she asked the girl to stop calling her master. Sakura laughed and promised to make amends. Garnet in return allowed herself to be called simply, "Hey." Seeing Luke smile, she frowned. "Why are you smiling?" "It's just a nice scene," he replied, turning away. Some time passed and the day of the audience arrived. Luke was led to the camp where the royal retinue was temporarily staying. He stood in front of the tent, feeling sweat cover his palms. And just then, someone slapped him loudly on the back. "At least he doesn't faint," Garnet joked. Felix smiled encouragingly. "Don't worry, His Majesty is a good man." After that, Luke was led to the tent, where King Alfred himself was already waiting for him. Luke was admitted into a spacious, tented hall. Along a long table sat officials, advisors, and nobles, with the king himself at the head. As Luke entered, Alfred looked up and said with a friendly smile, "Greetings, Master of the White Cave. Please come in." Before him sat King Alfred, a manly man with clear eyes and gray hair. He looked about 50, but his bearings still carried the strength of a warrior. Luke could not shake the strange feeling that he had seen this man before. The king ordered a break, and all the nobles left the tent. When the door closed, only the two of them remained in the room. Luke glanced nervously around. There was no guard. "Do they really trust me that much?" he wondered. The king broke the silence first. Alfred, without losing his good nature, invited him to sit anywhere. "Don't worry," he said. "The seats they occupied are not for anyone. Sit wherever you feel comfortable." Luke nodded cautiously and tried to speak as respectfully as possible. As he chooses a seat, he hesitates whether it is proper for him to sit during an audience. Finally, he sits in the farthest corner, but the king, suddenly standing up, crosses over and sits opposite. His smile only widens a little. "How will we talk if you run to the other end of the table?" the king said with a slight sneer. Luke immediately blushed and became even more embarrassed, fearing that he had offended His Majesty. But Alfred just continued calmly, "Relax. All suspicions are cleared from you. You are found innocent in the case of the hero Falcon and in the alleged illegal use of mithril." His voice sounded sincere. "I apologize if this ordeal has caused you trouble." Luke hastily denied that everything was fine and sincerely thanked the king for his justice. Hearing this, Alfred became more serious. "Then let's talk about more important things." He explained that the hero Falcon had disobeyed orders and attacked the Dark Fortress on his own. Because of his reckless actions, war would inevitably break out between the kingdom and the Dark Lord. The king continued that the Dark Kingdom was already fortifying its borders, so it would be necessary to establish an outpost and gather an army to counter it. Otherwise, they will come first, he added quietly. Luke listened intently, feeling the tension building inside him. War seemed inevitable, but he didn't understand why he was being told this. Finally, he dared to ask a question. "Your Majesty, why are you telling me this?" he asked cautiously. The king smiled. "Because I need you. We are establishing a military post in the Sunwood that will serve as a base for both the Order and the adventurers. And I want you to help." Alfred explained that he wanted Luke to explore the door leading to the lower levels of the dungeon and help set up the mechanisms. "You will receive a worthy reward," he assured. Luke sighed in confusion. His face showed no joy. The king raised his eyebrows. "Strange. I thought you would be more pleased with work than with gold." Luke smiled awkwardly. "I just think it's too big for one person." Alfred waved his hand. "No one's forcing you, but I want to know your opinion." He held out several sheets of construction plans. "Take a look and tell me what you think," he said calmly. Luke carefully unfolded the documents. His eyes went pale as he scanned the lines. According to the plan, Sunwood was to be closed for 3 months. This meant that Green Hollow would lose all its income. The town simply could not survive without the influx of adventurers. Luke stood up abruptly. "If we do this, people will starve to death," he shouted. The king nodded as if he had been expecting this. "I knew you would say that, and I agree." Alfred explained that the base would be guarded by the Order of the Golden Fangs, and when it was ready, they would be able to hold back the dark forces. But for now, the city would indeed be under attack. Luke understood that this was militarily sensible, but economically a disaster. Seeing his agitation, the king said gently, "If you have other ideas, I'm listening." The thought of the king asking for his advice made Luke gather his courage. "Maybe I'm wrong, but it's pointless to build for so long. Why protect people if they're going to die of poverty?" After thinking for a few seconds, he added, "I can shorten this time by using my skill. If I use repairs to create a base, the work will take a few weeks." Alfred's eyes lit up with curiosity. "And how will you do that?" His voice sounded genuinely interested. Luke explained that he could dismantle buildings in the surrounding villages and use the fragments, joining them together with the power of his skills. "Half the material is enough. I'll take the rest from the stone and wood of the dungeon," he said. The king slapped his hand on the table approvingly. "Amazing! Only a person with such a gift could have invented this," he exclaimed with sincere admiration. Luke only mentioned that there was one problem: the lack of magic crystals. At this, Alfred smiled. "Don't worry, I will provide you with everything you need. You will receive as many mana crystals as you need." "Your plan is accepted," the king concluded. "Now all that's left is to convince the rest." He asked Luke to stay in the meeting to present his idea. Luke agreed, though he could feel the sweat breaking out on his forehead again. When he presented his idea to the nobility, there was a murmur of approval in the hall. The nobles recognized that reusing materials would significantly save resources. The only problem remained was the passage to the Dark Fortress. Luke sighed in relief. His proposal had been supported. But the king, leaning forward, turned to the man in the black cloak, the representative of the Order of the Golden Fangs. "Sir Gilbert, what do you say?" He rubbed his chin thoughtfully and replied calmly, "The idea is worth considering, but I have 2 conditions from the Order. The first is to use the debris from the ruins of our detachment in Cranford." After a short pause, Gilbert said that the second demand of the Order was to establish another base of operations. He stood up, holding the map, and walked over to where Luke was standing to point to a dot on the map. His hand confidently touched the canvas. "Here," he said, pointing to the area near the rift from which the dragon had recently escaped. "We want to establish ourselves right on the edge of the Dark King's domain." A tense silence fell in the hall. Gilbert looked at Luke. "This will be a colossal operation, but if your skill is as good as they say, you can handle it." His voice was calm, but there was a challenge in his eyes. His approval was the last thing needed to make the plan a reality. Luke took a deep breath and a little nervously replied, "Yes, I can do it." His voice trembled, but it sounded confident. "Then I support it," Gilbert said, returning to his seat. Luke thanked him sincerely and looked around the room. "Does everyone agree? I want everyone's opinion to be heard." There was a nod of approval in response. The king stood up, smiling contentedly. So, the decision is made. And as a reward for your work, when both bases are built, I will issue you an official license to process mithril. His words made Luke smile genuinely for the first time. With that, the meeting was over. One by one, the nobles and counselors left the hall until only two remained. Luke and the king. The master had already risen, preparing to leave, when he heard a calm voice. Take your time, Luke. He approached Alfred and politely asked how he could be of service. The king simply leaned back in his chair, relaxed, and said, Nothing. I just wanted to talk. No protocol. His tone was strangely simple, almost friendly. Alfred smiled. I haven't heard the name of the White Cave for a long time. Luke was surprised that the monarch pronounced it so familiarly, as if he had been there himself. The king continued quietly. I once spent the night in that valley, before the test of succession to the throne. I was traveling with the pack then, he recalled, and we sat by the fire and talked to the villagers. Those were good times. His gaze warmed, as if he were seeing memories rather than Luke. After a pause, Luke timidly asked, Your Majesty, why did you decide to end your adventures and become king? If it's not too personal? Alfred laughed. A bold question, but good. Just don't tell anyone. He leaned closer and said, almost in a whisper, It's all about love. Luke blinked in surprise. He had expected to hear about politics or debt, but not this. I met her when we were both adventurers, Alfred said with a soft smile. She was brave, headstrong, and smarter than me in everything. Luke couldn't believe it when he heard, You mean the queen was an adventurer too? Yes, the king nodded, and I was too stupid to appreciate it right away. He told how they had traveled together for a long time, overcoming dangers, and gradually realized that something more than companionship was being born between them. Traveling brings people closer, he said quietly. Then Alfred asked, Remind me, Luke, what are the conditions for the heir to the throne? You need to go down to the dungeon and get the artifact, Luke replied. Yes, but there is one more rule, the king smiled. Marry the princess and join the royal family. Luke looked up in surprise. He had never heard anything like that before. Alfred continued, She had a steely character, and she declared that she would find a husband for herself, proving that she was worthy of this title. That is why she became an adventurer. Luke listened, fascinated. But later, when the time came to choose an heir, the princess was forcibly returned to the palace. It was then that Alfred learned for the first time who she really was. After that, I couldn't make any other choice, he sighed. I became king for her. Luke nodded silently, a wave of respect welling up in his chest. That night in White Gable, I couldn't sleep, Alfred continued. I was talking to the headman's son. The boy was extremely inquisitive, asking about adventures until his eyes burned. Luke's eyes suddenly widened. The headman's son, he whispered. Meanwhile, the king remembered. I told him about how I ended up on Turtle Island and fought dragons. And also, he added, about that battle on the undersea. Luke couldn't help himself and interrupted. And you also said how you snatched the tiara from the hands of the undead king. The king blinked in surprise. Exactly. But how do you know that? Both of them froze for a moment, and then Alfred laughed. So that's who you are. The same boy from White Cave. Luke couldn't help but smile. The circle closed. Until this moment, he had never told anyone about his childhood, only Sylvia and Sakura. And now he stood before the man whose stories had once inspired him to become an adventurer. How do you look back on those years now? He asked. Alfred replied seriously. Some say that if I had sought power from the beginning, we would have lived in a single state long ago. But I think that is nonsense. Those years made me who I am, he continued. The successes, the failures, the fears, the victories, all of them gave me strength. Without them, I would have died 12 years ago. The king was silent for a moment, then leaned toward Luke. There is something I tell only you. His voice dropped. Sometimes I think about giving up the throne and returning to adventuring. Luke froze, stunned, but Alfred immediately smiled. But every time fate proves that I am still needed here, and I stopped dreaming about it. Luke said quietly, because you are really needed. As a king. The king nodded. Sometimes as a ruler, sometimes as an adventurer. I was lucky to find my place. Then he looked at Luke more warmly. And you, master, have anyone ever said such words to you? Hearing the king's words, Luke immediately remembered Sylvia. Her warm smile when she had said quietly, "We need you, even if you don't realize it," came to mind like a ray of light through the clouds. His mind immediately returned to Green Hollow. The shop, the smell of metal, the smiles of Sakura and Sylvia, the bustle of customers. It was there that he felt he belonged, alongside these people, amidst the sounds of hammering and the peace of a small town. The king, observing his thoughtful gaze, asked quietly, "So did these words help dispel your doubts?" Luke smiled slightly. "On the contrary, your majesty, they only made them deeper. Now I understand," he added, "that every path can lead to something beautiful, and the choice between them has only become more difficult." Alfred laughed. "You see, too many opportunities is also a test. Relax, son of the headman." The next morning, Luke was closing up shop. Everything was packed and it was time to leave. But he hadn't taken a few steps when he heard a familiar voice. Sylvia, out of breath, ran up, carrying a basket of provisions. They set off together along the forest path. "I still can't believe," she said, "that they're actually going to build a military base in the Sunwood. If I'm not mistaken, they're going to call it Underwood?" Luke nodded. "And I'm surprised I was called to help." The base was planned to be located in a giant underground cave on the 5th level, the same one where Noah encountered the dragon as a stronghold for defense against the Dark King. According to the plan, the entrance through which the dragon broke through will be surrounded by barricades, and several checkpoints will be created around it between the Dark Fortress and Green Hollow. As long as the base is standing, no outsider will be able to pass. Luke said confidently, "When this is over, Green Gables will be safe, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen." Sylvia looked at him in surprise. His gaze was calm and confident, as if for the first time he truly believed in himself. "You look different today," she said with a soft smile. "Maybe so," he replied, smiling back. "Remember when I told you how I decided to become an adventurer?" "Of course," she nodded. "So, recently I met one of those who inspired me back then." "And now this man is a king," Luke said, not hiding his admiration. "His life has become proof that even a dreamer can change the world." He was silent for a moment, then added with a slight smile, "I became an adventurer out of respect for him, and now I must not betray my own words." Sylvia listened attentively, but a shadow of sadness appeared in her voice. "You're not leaving here again, are you?" she asked quietly. "You're not going back to adventure? Maybe even with him?" Her smile was sad but sincere. Luke shook his head in denial. "He stopped traveling himself," he explained, "not because he was tired or discouraged, but because he met someone who needed him, and he realized that his place was next to that person." Luke looked up thoughtfully. "But he's happy, and I'm happy for him, because even without the adventures, he still has the same strength that I once saw in his stories." Sylvia breathed a sigh of relief. Her eyes lit up again. "He's a really great person to be able to inspire someone like you," she said. Luke nodded. "Yes, and I hope to do the same for others someday." He remembered the king's words. "Sometimes you are needed as a seeker, sometimes as a creator," and added thoughtfully, "Maybe part of me still wants to go again. But," he glanced at Sylvia, "now I know that this is not the only way." His gaze returned to the shop. "This place is my adventure too, and I have no right to leave it until I thank you all for your kindness." Sylvia smiled joyfully this time, without a hint of sadness. "Then I won't give up either," she said. "If you stay, I'll help make this hollow even better." A few days later, Luke and Sakura stood in front of the new location of their future base. "Everything has changed again," he said, looking out over the cleared valley. "The forest base is complete," he added. "Now we're starting the underground one." Sakura nodded enthusiastically. "That's right. Today we'll be exploring the area around the Dark Fortress." Hearing her call this place the Dark Fortress Zone, Luke flinched. "You call it that?" "Yeah," she smiled. "You'll get used to it." She took a step forward. "Let's go down." A guard stopped them at the entrance, checking their passes. Sakura noticed that the door mechanism was missing. "The royal entourage couldn't get it to work from the outside," Luke explained. "They just had to break it down." "A bold decision," Sakura smiled. "Your king is fearless." Luke nodded. "Yes, but this is the first time I've been here since that destruction. I'm even a little worried." "Then it's doubly interesting," Sakura said, stepping into the darkness. "Let's go, master." They moved along a narrow corridor and soon found themselves in a gigantic cave. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and sharp stone spears protruded from the ground. The air was thick as smoke. Unbelievable, Sakura whispered. Is this really underground? Luke nodded. Such places do happen, but something this big is rare, even for experienced adventurers. She walked slowly around the cave, examining the walls. They say dragons used to live here, but everything is peaceful here. Luke pointed to the black crystal that stood on the pedestal. That's one of the reasons. This is a barrier stone, he explained. There are 4 of them, one at each corner of the cave. Thanks to them, no dragon can come near, so we are completely safe. Sakura, peering into the dark crystal, says in surprise that it drives away not only dragons, but also magical beasts. She has never seen anything like it. Luke replies that only the most powerful alchemists create such artifacts. They are usually placed to mark dangerous areas, and that's just one reason, he adds. But before Sakura can ask about the other, a huge shadow suddenly appears behind her. It grows rapidly until it falls to the ground with a thud, a heavy beast with wings that raises a wave of dust. A young man with long golden hair, dressed in noble attire, and with a charming smile emerges from the smoke. Sorry for intruding, he says calmly. That dragon was too hot-tempered, so I overdid it a bit. Sakura nods in confusion. It's okay, she quietly tells Luke. I guess that's the second reason why dragons don't come near here. He smiles awkwardly. Yes, you're right. This is Theodore Beaufort, Luke explains. A dragon slayer, a descendant of an ancient family. He abandoned the life of a nobleman to devote himself to hunting these creatures. Sakura remembers hearing his name in the guild. He's one of the A-rank adventurers Luke had told her about. We used to travel together, he adds, and we got along terribly. But all you had to do was mention the word dragon, and he arrived in an instant. Sakura looks down at her sword. I admire those who can defeat a dragon on their own, she says with a hint of sadness. And I couldn't then. I want to become worthy of this katana. Hearing her words, Luke remembers something and asks if she will let him check the condition of her katana. Sakura smiles. I was going to ask you that myself. Luke activates the analysis skill. After a short pause, he says, Katana is still growing with you. Give her some time. She hasn't reached her full potential yet. Then he quotes an Eastern proverb. He who walks 100 miles has only half come when he has walked 90. Luke advises her to be patient and steadfast for herself and for her sword. Sakura listens attentively, her eyes fixed on him. Although, he smiles, it doesn't sound very convincing coming from me. Sakura counters, on the contrary, I don't doubt myself anymore. She asks him to look after her wakajishi, and for a moment Luke doesn't understand what she means. Sakura explains that she only wants to train with a katana today. She assures him that she won't overexert herself. Luke sees her confidence and nods, allowing her to stay. Okay, then I'll look after you, he says. Good luck. Thank you, she replies, and good luck to you too. Luke laughs. I don't intend to die until I finish this. That's how it should be, she replies. There are so many people still waiting for our help. Luke calls the porters, ordering them to pile up the building materials in the designated spot. One of the knights reminds them, don't use the stone and dirt around here. The ceiling might collapse. Luke nods, understanding the risk. He takes out the mana crystals given by the king and asks everyone to step aside. Focusing, he activates the repair skill. With a bright flash, a new massive structure appears before everyone. One of the knights is delighted. Incredible. You built this with just skill? Luke modestly replies that it's all thanks to the crystals. He invites him to go to the arsenal, but Luke suddenly becomes wary. He wanted to warn about something strange he heard, but he didn't have time. A bright explosion splits the air behind him. Everyone instantly returns to the scene of the fall. Thick smoke fills the cave, screams echo in the darkness. A demonic attack, one of the guards shouts. Their crossbows are drawn simultaneously. The smoke clears, revealing a silhouette long, with a thick tail covered in black scales and spread wings. The figure seems inhuman, but looking closely, Luke freezes. It's a human, but with wings and a tail that shine with a dark glow. There's a mask on the face and growths that look like scales on the body. Enemy, the knights shout. They fire at the alien, trying to break through his magical barrier. Luke sees his shield glow. It was he who saved him from falling. But the stranger doesn't even move. He just flaps his wings sharply and the arrows freeze in the air, then fly in different directions. The force of the blow forces the warriors to take cover. The knights prepare to fire another volley, but the stranger clenches his fist and flames burst into his hand. A moment later, the flames burst forward, turning into a torrent of flame that scorches the knights and melts their armor. They scream, throwing down their weapons, while Luke only watches helplessly. His heart sinks. Who is this half-dragon who can destroy dozens of warriors with a single swing of his arm? Not even Felix or Sakura could handle him. The knight nearby grabs Luke's arm. "Go! Hurry!" The warrior pulls him toward safety, but the movement catches the creature's attention. Fiery eyes turn directly to Luke. The stranger stops his attack. His wings spread, kicking up a storm of dust, and in a moment he is soaring, heading straight for Luke. The knights shout orders, preparing a second wave of defense. It all happens in a flash. A moment ago he was far away, and now he's standing right behind Luke. A breath of cold runs across his skin. His body is gripped by fear. When he finally opens his eyes, he sees the depth of the gorge below him. He is falling. Obviously, the creature has thrown him down. His body aches, his bones are breaking in pain. But one thought, who is he? And why is Luke his target? Luke struggles to get up, feeling his arms and legs ache from the fall. He touches his belt and suddenly freezes. The wakizashi, given to him by Sakura, is gone. His heart beats faster. He has no right to lose it. Looking around, he notices the blade nearby, among the rubble. Luke bends down and picks up the wakizashi and squeezes it in his hand. You can't lose what's entrusted to you, he thinks. But suddenly there's a dull thud nearby, as if something big had fallen from an incredible height, kicking up a cloud of dust. He instantly hides behind a fragment of rock. From there he sees a familiar shadow descending below. The same half-dragon. He hasn't retreated yet. Luke understands. A direct fight is suicide, and it's also difficult to escape. Placing his palm against the cold wall of the gorge, he activates the analysis skill. His eyes glow with a faint light. The Dark King had mines here, so there must be an entrance to the old mine somewhere nearby. Running his hand along the stone, Luke feels a vibration, a place where the structure of the wall changes. There is something here. It seems as if a void echoes behind the stones. Separation, he whispers, activating the skill. The stone before him trembles, cracking as if from the breath of a living being. A wide opening cuts through the wall, leading into darkness. Cold and dust blow from the passage, but the noise wakes up the pursuer. The half-dragon turns its head sharply at the sound. Luke knows he's been exposed. Without looking back, he leaps into the darkness, his wakizashi clutched in his left hand. Behind him, the air cracks as wings beat. The half-dragon reaches out to attack, but Luke, without wasting a second, activates recovery. The wall behind him is instantly closed in stone, sealing off the entrance, tightly cutting off the enemy. Ugh, I barely made it, he whispered, exhaling. Rising to his feet, Luke looks around carefully. The place resembles an old corridor, smooth walls, a flat floor, traces of skillful masonry. The lanterns glowing faintly on the walls disperse the darkness. These are more ancient ruins than a mine, Luke whispers. But suddenly there are dull thuds behind him. Thud. Thud. The sound intensifies. It's someone pounding on the newly restored wall. He found me, Luke grits his teeth. He doesn't understand why this monster is so persistently pursuing him. He sees two ways. Stay here, constantly repairing the wall until the crystal's power runs out, or take a risk and flee further through an unknown tunnel, looking for a way out. Having weighed everything, Luke squeezes the crystal in his hand. It is better to move. To stand still means to die. And he breaks into a run down the long stone corridor, dimly lit by bluish lanterns. He knows he can't wait. If this half-dragon can break stone, no barrier will save him. Only distance gives him a chance to survive. At the end of the passage is a narrow staircase leading up. The hatch rises, but encounters a blank wall. A blank corner? He quickly activates analysis, searching for a hidden passage. At that moment, a loud rumble is heard behind him. He looks around, and at the same moment, a sharp pain shoots through his body. The blade pierces his stomach, exiting through his back. Blood sprays onto the stone. A half-dragon stands before him, smiling coldly and ominously. A long sword is stuck deep into Luke's body. Warm blood runs down the hilt, wetting the enemy's palm. Without giving him time to react, he pulls out his sword and plunges it into his body again. Deeper. Luke chokes on blood, but smiles. His hands grip the blade tightly, preventing his opponent from retreating. This is the only chance, he thinks. He activates splitting. The metal in his hands trembles, cracks, shatters into fragments. Using the fragments of the blade and parts of the enemy's armor, he instantly launches regeneration. The metal, mixing with bone fragments, forms dozens of sharp shards that cut into the half-dragon's body. Luke laughs hoarsely through the pain. I didn't think it would work, but it did. His face is a mixture of triumph and despair. A memory flashes through my mind. The king's task of creating a sword that could not be pulled from the rock, and his idea of fusing the blade in the stone. I did the same thing now, only in reverse. Luke disassembled the blade that had pierced him, connected it to the enemy's armor, and returned it to his body. Now the blade had become a part of the enemy. But the half-dragon only roars in rage. Its body bursts into flames, flames shooting out, licking everything around it. Luke instinctively covers himself with his hand, feeling the heat. He's crazy. He'll burn everything down with him. Luke panics and takes out a short blade. Sakura's voice echoes in his memory. Scarlet guides fire, but those who are not afraid can control it. He remembers her words. Scarlet's metal does indeed conduct the energy of flame. If used correctly, it can be received and returned to fire. The fire wraps around the blade as if it were alive. The flame is drawn to the sword, consumed by it. Luke, feeling the heat in his hand, resolutely raises the blade. If you are a dragon, then I will be your forging flame, he exclaims and slashes his enemy across the face, aiming for the mask. The blow splits the air. Metal buzzes, sparks fly, but the blade collides with solid armor. The mask only cracks. The fragment falls to the ground. Luke feels a powerless rage. The enemy is almost unharmed. His armor can withstand anything. Luke is on his knees, exhausted and covered in blood. The half-dragon, a young man with dark wings, is also standing nearby, seemingly about to fall. He breaks the fusion with the armor, and the fire around him subsides. Luke realizes he has done all he can. Now he must survive and regain his strength, even if the battle is lost. But suddenly the enemy opens his mouth and quietly, insistently says his name. Luke. His voice is muffled, as if strangled under a mask. Luke freezes. He did not expect that the creature that had just tried to burn him would know his name. He raises his head and sees a face. The mask has fallen, and through the charred scales, human features emerge. The features are familiar. Luke peers in, and his chest feels cold. Although his face is distorted, although his eyes glow red, he recognizes him immediately. Standing before him is none other than Falcon, his former partner, the hero he once considered a friend. Falcon, panting, clutches the wounds on his chest, blood pouring down his hands. Luke! He wheezes again, barely standing on his feet. His body trembles, but hatred burns in his eyes. Falcon, is that you? Luke whispered, not believing his eyes. The hero who once led their squad now looks cursed. Luke cannot understand how he turned into a monster. Memory cuts through consciousness. The dark cave, the wounds, and Falcon's same cold voice. We don't mind a loser with repair skills. That's when he was left to die. Later, Noah told him that Falcon was captured by the Dark King Gandalf. His squad suffered a crushing defeat. Luke now understands. Captivity turned the hero into a monster. How did you survive? Falcon screams, his eyes burning. You should have died. We left you there. His voice breaks into a scream, full of rage. Flames flare up all around him again, as if from his hatred. Luke backs away, shielding himself from the heat with his hand. He doesn't understand how Falcon found him, but one thing is clear. He's no longer human. The Dark King has broken him, warping his mind and body. Falcon takes a deep breath. His chest rises, and the next moment he exhales fire, a continuous stream of flame, like the breath of a real dragon. Luke only manages to look up in fright. Flames roll up the wall, and he realizes he must trust his short sword again. His hands are burned, but he grabs the blade. Swinging, he cuts through the flames, breaking them in half. The heat still burns his face and hands. He's even stronger than he was before, Luke thinks, gritting his teeth, and suddenly a hand reaches out through the fire. The blow is sharp, precise. Falcon's fist hits Luke in the back of the head. The world before his eyes goes out. His body falls to the stone floor, blood running down his cheeks. Falcon roughly grabs him by the hair, lifts him up, and forces him to look straight into his eyes. Blood flows from the wound, leaving a dark stain on the floor. His gaze is both ice and fire. He expects fear, but instead he sees a smile. Luke, barely breathing, wheezes. I knew I didn't stand a chance in close combat. And he even laughs. Are you laughing? Falcon roars. Because of you, everything is ruined. Because of you, we are dead. He screams so that the walls vibrate and the flames rise higher again. Luke only slightly looks away. Don't joke like that, hero, he replies with bitter irony. You yourself called me worthless, remember? His voice trembles, but there is strength in it. You should know better than anyone who I am, Luke adds, clenching his bloody fist. His words are quiet, but each syllable is like a knife. Falcon explodes with rage. This is all because of you, he shouts, because you hid your strength. You've been pretending to be weak all this time. Luke looks up, stunned. He doesn't immediately understand the meaning of what was said. Was he hiding his strength? His shoulders shake, and he can't hold it in. A quiet, then louder laugh escapes his lips. Falcon squeezes his hair even tighter, tilting his head. What are you laughing at? He shouts, looking him straight in the eyes, full of contempt and incomprehension. Luke stops laughing, but the smile remains. You really don't get it, he says quietly. Do you think I was hiding something? If you knew the truth, you would just smile. He clutches the crystal and the hilt of the sword with trembling hands. I wasn't hiding anything. It's just that my skill is a little higher than you could imagine. That's all. Luke understands Falcon, guided by the Dark King's orders, is not chasing him, but a memory. This creature has only a fragment of the hero he once was left, and all his rage is now directed at the past. This anger and resentment are the fuel that burns him from the inside, and that's why Falcon can't stop until he destroys everything that reminds him of the old days. Luke grips the crystal tighter in his hand. All these powers, healing, destroying, I gained them after you left me to die in that cave. His voice grows stronger. I fought every day. I fell. I got up again. And in the end, I learned to do what you couldn't. Do you think I hid my strength? No, I gained it. He looks Falcon straight in the eye. Now I have no secrets. Not from you, not from myself. The hero is silent, stunned, unable to object. And then a flash of the past appears in his eyes. Memories flood in. The battle with the Dark King, the scream of Julius covering him, Blanca and Noah falling under the shadow of the enemy. A drop of sweat or perhaps a tear runs down Falcon's cheeks. Luke, in a grave voice, says that if they had all descended deeper into the cave together then, he would probably have shared their fate. He would have been captured and also become a plaything of the Dark King. Do you understand what this means, Falcon? He asks. The former hero shudders, clenching his fists, and hisses through his teeth. Shut up. No, Luke calmly replies. You are to blame for everything that happened. You destroyed yourself with your own hands. His words sound confident, but it is this confidence that fuels Falcon's rage. The hero shouts for him to shut up, unable to bear the truth. Falcon swings to hit him in the head, but Luke manages to squeeze the crystal in his palm and activates the ability just before the blow. Everything around him shudders. The floor beneath them cracks, breaks with a dull thud, and falls down. Stone slabs fly into the abyss, raising streams of dust. While they were talking, Luke had time to scan the surface. He discovered a cavity under the stone, and now at the moment of falling, he uses his last strength. He activates fusion, driving the short blade into the wall. The sword sinks deep into the stone, fusing with it. Luke, hanging over the abyss, clutches the hilt, feeling every muscle burning with tension. This is his only chance. He holds on. Falcon doesn't. He dives down, flapping his wings, but suddenly they break, blood spurting from them. A scream of pain and rage echoes through the gorge. Fear appears on his face for the first time. In the reflection of his eyes is the fading sky. And at the same moment, the face of Julius, who once smiled at him before the last fight, flashes in his memory. Julius, he cries, falling into the darkness. His voice is lost in the wind, in despair and silence. Luke looks down at him, showing no sympathy. A sound comes from the depths. A body disappears into the darkness. Somewhere below, a faint reflection glitters, an underground lake. Silence falls, thick and cold. Luke looks down, his eyes fixed on the ground. I'm sorry, Falcone. Now it's my turn to leave you, he says quietly before letting go of the crystal and turning away. Gathering his remaining strength, Luke slowly climbs up. His fingers grip the edge of the cliff, his body shaking with exhaustion. He lies on his back, breathing heavily, and finally allows himself to smile. It's all over. This time, it's not like that time. Faces flash before his eyes: Sylvia, Sakura, Garnet. Their smiles fill his heart with warmth. I would like to see you again, he whispers, sinking into peace. A few days have passed. Luke's little shop is open again. There has been no attack since the half-dragon was destroyed. The Dark King seems to have quieted down. The underground base is built, construction completed without incident. Thus, a new fortress appeared. Downiford Hollow. Luke looks at it with relief. Finally, everything is cleaned up. He sighs and returns to his forge to reopen the shop. A familiar man enters the store with a slight smile. Mr. Luke, long time no see, he says. Luke turns around and sees Felix and Garnet standing in front of him. I heard the Order of the Golden Fangs told me all about you. Felix laughs. They say you almost died fighting a monster. Garnet snorts. And you haven't changed at all. Felix gives her a reproachful look. Don't be rude. He then adds that he has heard of Luke's enormous contribution to the construction of the fort. The king and we are all grateful to you, he says. Without you, this mission would have dragged on for months. Luke just shrugs, smiling. No need to thank me. I just did my job. On the contrary, Felix replies, it's thanks to you that we can all live in peace now. He takes out an envelope and hands it to Luke. This is for you, from the palace. Luke unfolds the letter and his eyes widen. Inside is an official license to mine and sell mithril. The document states, development of deposits in the dungeon, 1,000-year passage to hell, which leads through the secret tunnel of the sunny forest. Extraction and production, only in the volumes established by the royal palace. There are a few more conditions, Felix adds. Monthly reports on all products and customers. But I know you can handle it. Luke nods, smiling. There is one more request, Felix says, turning to Garnet. The Order of the Silver Wings asks permission to keep her here with you as a guard and liaison. Luke raises an eyebrow. You want to keep Garnet? Her? He asks, surprised. Felix puts his hand on his chest. Yes. We learned that the hero Falcon has fallen into the hands of the Dark King. The palace is in panic. Yes, Garnet adds. The top brass of the Order of the Golden Fang are in disarray. They can't believe their beloved hero has turned into a monster. Felix explains solemnly that their mission is to investigate his disappearance. But while they are away, Luke's safety is the highest priority. The Order must leave the city, so they offer him temporary protection. Luke asks, so you want Garnet to stay as my bodyguard? Exactly, Felix confirms. Her knighthood will be kept secret, he adds. It would be nice if you hired her as a regular assistant. Luke hesitates but eventually agrees, though he looks embarrassed. Are you sure it's not better to leave someone else? He asks cautiously. Felix just smiles. Don't worry, and don't treat her differently just because she's our commander's sister. Luke throws up his hands. I didn't mean to, but Garnet's eyes are already shining. One careless comment, and it seems she would slap him. Luke just smiles awkwardly, realizing that his new, quiet life is once again taking on an explosive hue. Felix asked Luke if anything was bothering him. Luke sighed, waved his hand wearily. No, nothing. Garnet, coming closer, said confidently, That's great. So it's settled. I'm staying, whether you like it or not. Luke smiled sarcastically. Thanks for asking my opinion. Garnet just shrugged. What can we do? The Order has received a pointless investigation that will not yield anything. The authorities ordered it, so I will carry it out. I think you understand. She crossed her arms behind her head, looking at him defiantly. You have a warm place here, so even if I have to take care of you, don't complain. Luke replied in a tone of voice. It's nice to have someone take shelter with me. Garnet added, I'm also pretty good at manual labor. Use it when you need it. Luke sighed resignedly. If she agrees, I have no objection. Felix nodded in satisfaction. Oh, great. Then I guess I'll leave you two alone. He winked in farewell. If Garnet causes any problems, text me right away. I'll come running in a flash. The girl gave him a stern look. I'm not causing any problems. Luke muttered quietly. This is a miracle. Felix bowed and left, saying he would come if he needed help. Luke waved after him. Garnet shrugged her shoulders. finally got rid of his constant grumbling. "You're terribly rude," Luke remarked. "So first things first, right?" he asked, looking at the heavy bag. "It must weigh a ton." "Yes," Garnet replied calmly, "but I'm not going to unpack yet. Just open the door for me." Luke blinked. "I'm sorry, what can I do?" "Open the door," she repeated. They stared at each other in silence for a few seconds until Luke asked, "Garnet, where are you going to live?" "You have it," she replied simply, pointing her finger at his house. "There are enough free rooms here, right? So why are you standing there? Open it." "What? No, wait a minute," he exclaimed. Luke turns away, trying to gather his thoughts. "This is going to be problematic. Maybe you should leave your things at the hotel. I can't do it. Seriously." "Don't laugh," she retorts. "I'm not kidding," he grumbles. But Garnet moves closer resolutely. "You're in danger here. If someone attacks or tries to kidnap you, no one will even know." She reminds him that he lives alone on the outskirts, far from the city. "You could be killed and no one would even hear. So what would you do if you were caught off guard?" she says, crossing her arms. "Any other questions?" Garnet adds. Luke closes his eyes. "No, unfortunately." "That's great," she replies with a triumphant smile. Luke exhales. "Okay, I guess you're right. Thanks for deciding to stay and protect me." He extends his hand. "Agreed. Nice to work with you, Garnet." She shakes his hand, smiling gently. "Reciprocally, White Wolf. And thanks for the shelter." Luke laughs, but suddenly a familiar voice is heard from afar. "Luke!" They turn their heads at the same time. Two girls are standing outside the store. "Good morning," one says cheerfully. "We heard you open the store again, so we came to help." The girls come closer. "Oh, Garnet! How many years, how many winters?" Sakura exclaims. The second, Sylvia, asks in surprise, "Sakura, who is this?" Sakura giggles. "You've only seen him in armor, right?" Garnet frowns, then says with a smile, "Yes, it's me. I work here at the weapon shop now." Sylvia repeats the name, trying to remember, and suddenly her eyes widen. "Wait, is that you?" Blushing, she comes closer. "I thought you'd look more intimidating without armor, but you're so cute, just like a girl." Sakura, laughing, whispers, "Sylvia, they don't say that to men." Luke just shakes his head. "I thought so too." Smiling, he mentally adds, "It's a good thing her secret is safe." The girls are curious. "How will you work in the shop now? You're a Knight of the Order of the Silver Wings, right?" Garnet smiles. "We'll explain later, during work." Finally, peace and routine reign in the shop. But as always, it doesn't last long. There are a lot of customers. Someone asks for a long sword, and Luke replies, "Wait a minute, I'll be right back." Looking at the invoice, he starts grumbling. "Where's another one?" and calls out to Garnet, "Please bring another pair of bracers." Garnet, holding a pile of boxes, exclaims, "Wait, I'll lay this out first, then I'll bring it." One of the customers laughs. "This guy's tougher than he looks." Luke calls out to Sakura, "Please take this thing to Downiford Hollow." "No problem," she replies, disappearing through the door. "Luke," Sylvia calls, holding the basket. "I brought everyone drinks, and I made sandwiches. Let's eat while we work." Luke smiles. "Thanks, Sylvia. You're wonderful as always." "White Wolf," Garnet calls, carrying the box. "Here's what you asked for. Where to put the longswords?" Luke starts to remember, but is interrupted by the voice of the buyer. "Excuse me, sir, can you serve me?" the visitor asks politely. "Sure, right now," Luke replies, wiping his hands. The shop is buzzing like a beehive. Luke had dreamed of quiet, peaceful work, but instead he was thrown into chaos. Garnet laughs. "Isn't that better than risking your life?" Luke smiles. "Maybe, but I wouldn't mind a moment of silence." Sylvia said that there had been a noticeable increase in customers lately. Sakura added that when she and Sylvia were around, they managed somehow, but as soon as they left, everything turned into chaos. Luke just smiled sadly, agreeing. As Garnet leafed through the documents, she noticed that at this rate of work, they would soon be overwhelmed. Luke, folding his arms over his chest, nodded. "I know. It's probably time to hire someone new. I'll leave an announcement at the guild," he said. "And at the same time, I'm offering everyone dinner tonight. You can combine business with leisure." "Are you serious?" Sylvia smiled. "Thank you." Sakura was delighted. "Merida has fresh beef." Garnet raised her hands enthusiastically. "Oh, beef! If Luke treats you, it's a sin to refuse." When they entered the guild building, a young waitress greeted them and, recognizing familiar faces, exclaimed happily, "Mr. Luke, Miss Sylvie, long time no see." Sit down. What would you like to order? We're just having dinner, no work today, Luke replied. Garnet immediately spotted an empty table and ordered everyone to go there. Sakura giggled. Luke is treating us, so don't order the whole menu. Sylvia, holding her stomach, added, Order the beef. I'm hungry as a wolf. While they were waiting, the waitress asked, You must have had a lot of customers lately? Oh, yes, Luke replied. But you know, let's talk after dinner. I have a suggestion. Of course, the girl nodded, smiling. I'll find you after dinner, Luke promised. But suddenly a loud Luke came from the hall and he turned. The girl next to him also glanced over. It seems they're addressing you. Luke looked up and froze. In front of him stood a stocky man with a short beard and a good-natured smile. Long time no see, he said. Luke couldn't believe his eyes. Travis! Yes, old friend, he laughed. How old are you, huh? Luke was delighted. It was Travis of the Black Blade Ranges, one of those legendary adventurers he had once called upon for help. So you came to reinforce us, Luke asked. Of course, Travis replied. When my old friend asks for something, I don't refuse. Besides, you and I haven't had a pint of ale since then. He slapped Luke on the shoulder, almost knocking him over. You haven't changed at all, Travis laughed. Luke smiled. You haven't either, except you've gotten louder. One of his companions asked, Who is this? An old friend, Travis replied. We became adventurers at the same time, and now he's the owner of the forge. Oh, I've heard of him. He's the one who sells mithril swords. Come to us, they called. Sit down, let's talk like we used to. Travis smiled. I'll treat you. A real reunion of old wolves. Luke spread his hands. Sorry, guys, I can't. I didn't come alone. But bring your own. The more the better, exclaimed one of them. Luke wanted to refuse, but he heard someone calling his name. We found a table. Sylvia came over. Sakura and Garnet are already ordering. Travis froze, his eyes widening. Luke just waved his hand. Never mind, he's always nervous around women. I'm not nervous, Travis said indignantly, jumping back a step. I just don't know how to deal with them, he muttered. I'll say the wrong thing, or break it by accident. Oh, classic, Luke chuckled. It's called fear of women. Luke looked at his team, all men. You're not even trying to get over it, are you? He joked. You're not, Travis muttered, averting his gaze. I guess we can't have dinner, Luke sighed. Come by the store tomorrow and we'll talk it over. Oh, by the way, Travis exclaimed, I was just about to ask about the gloves. He showed his combat gloves. Can you coat them with mithril? I want to increase the protection against magic. No problem, Luke replied. Just need a little time and material. Will it work? Sure, Travis nodded. I'm out of mithril, Luke admitted, but I'll get some next weekend. If you're not in a hurry, I'll make it perfect. Don't rush, Travis smiled. The main thing is quality, and then someone new approached them. Luke turned around and saw Dustin standing before him. So I got your message, he said coldly. Even such unnecessary acquaintances come in handy sometimes. What a disgusting way to greet someone, Travis laughed. Is that how they say it to old friends? I don't have time for muscular fools who don't realize their own limitations, Dustin replied calmly. So please get your body out of the way. Dustin is another A-rank adventurer, known as the survivor of 2 prisons. Travis snorted. Look, he's changed. People grow, Dustin replied dryly, and you seem to have only grown in your shoulders. Then he looked at Luke. I'm glad to see that you finally listened to my advice. I said finish your adventures, otherwise death will catch up with you. Luke smiled. I remember. It's just been about 12 years. It happens, Dustin replied and started toward the exit. Already at the door, Travis sighed. It hurts to see old friends become like this. Yeah, it does, Luke agreed. Thank you, Merida, he said to the waitress standing next to him. She blushed. Oh, you're welcome, dear. Garnet just rolled her eyes. So, do you think you'll find workers? She asked. Maybe, Luke replied. There are always people in the guild who want to work. The main thing is to wait. He looked at his friends and for the first time in a long time felt truly at peace. Luke noticed Garnet munching on the beef with gusto. You're not holding back, are you? He joked. She just shrugged. You said you were treating yourself. Knights and adventurers should eat well while they can. Strength depends on it. Luke fell silent. Dustin's words flashed through his mind again, that it was time to end the adventure. If he continued, only death awaited him. He sighed softly. I guess he's right. Even food can be the difference between life and death. He said it with a bitter smile, as if admitting the obvious. After leaving the guild, they walked down the street among the crowd. Garnet looked around in surprise. Is this city always so crowded? No, Luke replied. It's just that a lot of adventurers have been coming lately. The shops used to close at night, but now they're open until dawn. Then the bathhouse should be open, Garnet smiled. It would be nice to wash off the dust after the day. Good idea, Luke agreed, glad to get a little rest. He suddenly stopped, blushed a little, and muttered, This is probably a strange question, but which bathhouse do you want to go to? What are you talking about? She asked in surprise. Luke showed the 2 keys lying in their palms. They stood by 2 doors, separate ones. Private bathrooms? He asked. Yes, Garnet replied. I made an arrangement with the owner. She turned the key on her finger, smiling predatorily. And you didn't expect us to bathe together, did you? Luke sighed and opened his door. And if I don't want to? Your loss, came the reply. Inside, he really didn't understand why they had to make such luxurious separate baths. Garnet explained through the wall. Such places are for aristocrats. It is not fitting for them to appear naked in front of commoners. Everything here is designed for restoration and peace. As she undressed, she added, I use such establishments so that no one will recognize me. And it's strange that you, older than me, don't know such things. I'm fine with regular public baths, Luke replied. Then let me treat you to this luxury as a thank you for dinner, Garnet said with a gentle smile. Luke blushed. I'm not that old. Approaching the window, he looked out in fascination. What a view! Incredible! He felt embarrassed inside. It all seemed too luxurious for people like them. White Wolf, her voice came. Can I ask? Of course. Those 2 you spoke to at the guild, that thug and that creepy guy. Who are they? Luke was wary. Why do you ask? I'm your bodyguard, she replied calmly. I need to know who you're talking to, especially if it could be dangerous. Besides, she added, you 2 don't seem to get along very well. You're attentive, Luke admitted. Yes, there's tension between us. We've known each other for over 10 years. The first is Travis of Blackblade Ridge, the fearless, loud, always smiling hero from the books. We met when we were both F-ranked rookies. Within a year, he became famous, assembled his own team. Luke smiled. Then he took me into the squad. And you left? Garnet asked. Yes, because he was too good, too capable. He deserved real comrades, not a repairman with no fighting skills. I couldn't afford to slow him down. He wanted to make things easier for me, Luke admitted, but I couldn't accept it. It's better to be a failure than a burden. A proud failure, Garnet said quietly. That's what Travis told me, Luke smiled. He continued. After that, we only worked together occasionally when I was repairing weapons. And 2 years later, fate brought me together with Dustin. The one who looked like he had just crawled out of the grave? She asked. Luke laughed. He was different once, cynical but alive, traveling with his companion, both wielding enchanted spears. Before they became adventurers, they worked as mercenaries. They could fight better than most of their rank. Luke fell silent, his voice quiet. She was killed, right before his eyes. He rushed to her, but it was too late. When you see death nearby, he said, you realize how quickly the body cools. Faster than you can believe. He will never forget that cold. He went mad with rage, Luke continued. He took both spears and destroyed all the enemies in the dungeon. Since then, he has been hunting those who call themselves the Dark Kings. Garnet narrowed her eyes. So he's the Dark Hunter, the one who killed 3 kings in 10 years? Yes, Luke confirmed, and destroyed more servants of darkness than anyone, even crowned heroes. He hates that nickname, Luke added. Once driven by revenge, now it's just habit. It's like he's died inside, only a mechanism built for hunting remains. Luke paused, staring at the steam rising from the hot water. That's why he looks at me like I'm a shadow of the past. Maybe we've all become ghosts of our adventures. Garnet didn't answer immediately. Her voice was soft. Then perhaps it's time to let go of the past, White Wolf. Otherwise, it will drag you back to where there is no warmth or life anymore. At this, the hero fell silent. He looked at Garnet and asked if she had any more questions. No, the girl replied quietly. You've told me enough already. I'm sorry to make you remember all that. Her voice sounded guilty, as if she regretted touching old wounds. However, she couldn't help herself and added, if you were called to the dungeon again, would you go? Luke sighed. As a former adventurer, no. But as the owner of a forge specializing in repairs, I can't refuse a request to restore equipment, can I? The day passed. Luke looked at the empty counter and thought that it was probably too early to expect any feedback. He had only posted the job ad yesterday. He sighed. Sakura promised to come by and help. The three of us, we'll manage for now. Suddenly, a woman with a child appeared in the doorway. Excuse me, she said timidly. We came to see the guild announcement. Is this the White Wolf Armory? Luke came closer. Yes, it's here. Are you looking for work? This was the first time he had seen the woman. Have you just arrived in town? Yes, she replied. We arrived last night. I have no money at all, so I'm looking for a job that I can start immediately. My name is Melissa, she said, and this is Nagi. The boy bowed politely. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Luke, the owner of this forge. He smiled. Garnet stood behind him. I'm a shop employee. Nice to meet you. I hope you're ready for some serious work. Sure, Melissa replied. We used to work in an antique store, so that shouldn't be a problem. Great, Luke nodded. It's good you came. A little time passed and Melissa was already seeing off the customers with a smile. Come in again. Meanwhile, Nagi was carrying heavy bags. Where should I put this? Luke noticed how diligently they were working. It's a shame they won't stay for long, someone said. Melissa laughed. It's an honor for us. Garnet, watching Nagi, asked, He's from the East, right? Yes, Melissa replied. Is that a problem? No, just curious, Garnet smiled. You rarely see Easterners here. He's the second one I know. The second one? Melissa was surprised. Yes, our friend. And at that very moment, a voice came from the door. Good morning. It was Sakura. Mr. Luke, I've come to help, she exclaimed cheerfully. Just in time, he said. Here's another Easterner, just like you. But he didn't have time to finish, because Sakura shouted, Kirikakure? What are you doing here? Nagi froze. Miko from Kakain. Luke blinked in confusion. Do you know each other? He asked. Sakura nodded. Yes, this is my friend from Kuregakure, Nagi. I didn't think you'd make it all the way to the Western lands, she said. And I didn't expect to meet you here, Shiranui Sakura, Nagi replied. I heard you ran away with Scarlet, but I didn't expect to find you in a hole like this. He didn't have time to finish because Melissa grabbed his shoulder. Enough, she shouted sharply. Smiling, Melissa added calmly, Nagi, we have to work, right? Yes, you're right, he muttered, turning away. Luke thought with relief. Thank God she intervened. It has some strange calming effect. Melissa pursed her lips angrily, and Garnet, standing next to her, whispered with a sly smile. Oh, how interesting! Luke cursed in his mind, realizing that the girl had already thought of something. A natural reaction, Garnet said, when an old acquaintance of a guy you like suddenly shows up. First of all, Luke objected, he's not an acquaintance, he's more of a rival. I'm not talking about Melissa, Garnet replied innocently. That's how it is, Luke laughed. It's unexpected to hear such subtleties about love from you. There was a dull thud, and Luke doubled over. Garnet, pretending nothing had happened, proudly went into the next room. Sakura rushed to him. Mr. Luke, are you okay? Don't pay attention, he muttered, rubbing his stomach. Garnet will explain what to do, Luke added. Yes, I understand. Sakura nodded. Meanwhile, he turned to Nagi, who was standing with his back to him. Start with the long swords in the storage room. But Nagi, without turning around, said seriously, Let me give you some advice. If Sakura asks you to create a crimson katana for her, refuse her, Nagi said. Luke raised his eyebrows in surprise. Especially if you consider her a friend. Too late, Luke replied. I've already started forging it. I see, Nagi said shortly. Then I'll take care of the longswords. 10 of them? Yes, bring them, Luke replied. He watched him go and thought, to say he was late with his advice would be an understatement. Nagi's words were strange, but he would learn the truth later. At that moment, the salesman called out to him, Mr. Luke, the buyer has a question. I'm going, he smiled. Later on his way back from Garnet, Luke said, I can't believe I'm spending my day off mining mithril. What do we have left? She replied. No new workers. Melissa and Nagi are back in the dungeons, she added. They've been a great help, but there's so much tension between her and Sakura that you could cut it with a knife. Luke was silent. He had never asked what had happened between Sakura and Nagi, but even the mention of the girl's name had made Melissa furious. Garnet, looking at the bag in his hands, said, Just take this to the Golden Fangs and come back. Luke asked, How long do you think the palace inspection will take? There's a lot of work there now, she replied. So 7 days. Luke nodded, turning away, and suddenly said quietly, Garnet, look over there. Ahead among the knights stood a girl in black. Noir, he whispered. I think the Order of the Silver Wings has detained her for questioning. I guess so, Garnet replied, her voice filled with anxiety. Garnet stepped forward sharply, looking directly at the girl among the knights, and coldly told them to stop immediately. One of the knights snorted mockingly, grumbling, And what do you want, little boy? His voice rang with contempt. Luke, noticing the tension, hastily smiled. Excuse me, he's with me. One of the knights looked more closely and exclaimed, Mr. Luke, you are the owner of the White Wolf. The girl in black shuddered sharply at the name. This woman is a former comrade of the hero Falcon, Luke explained. She is under the care of the Order of the Silver Wings. So I wonder why she is with you now. The knight straightened up. Noir is a key figure in our plan to storm the Dark Fortress. She has been tasked with leading the operation in that region. And this decision has been personally approved by Commander Carmine. Commander Carmine? Luke thought. So Brother Garnet. He hadn't expected this. The knight added, If Mr. Luke permits, it's time for us to leave. We're in a hurry. But Noir raised her head and quietly asked, A moment. She came closer, stopped in front of him and said, I know my apology won't change anything, but I still want to say it. Luke crossed his arms and turned away. I'm not going to forgive you, but I won't blame you for everything, he added, smiling out loud. I have enough work to do. I don't have the time or energy to waste on the past. Go. You have your own path, I have mine. When Noir left, Garnet said quietly, She probably wanted you to get angry and push her away. Then the guilt wouldn't have weighed so heavily, but your indifference hit deeper than any reproach. Luke looked down. I didn't mean it. A room with stone tables where knights had been loitering. Luke leaned over the rubble and activated cleavage. The stone trembled softly, splitting evenly, like butter under a blade. The knight at the counter exclaimed in surprise, Wow, this is the legendary cleft. Impressive. Luke scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I didn't think anyone would find it a miracle. He handed him the bag of parts. Done, all yours. And just then someone called from the side. Mr. Gunsmith, thank the gods you're here. Something urgent? Luke asked. Yes. Could you take a look at the ruins of the hero Gedney? Perhaps his secrets are hidden there. The man began, but he was interrupted by a familiar voice. You're working without rest again, huh? It was Travis, who had appeared unexpectedly. Travis, what are you doing here? Luke was surprised. On a business trip, he replied, protecting scientists and exploring ruins. There are no monsters here, but the work is boring. Seeing Garnet, he winked. Is this your brother? No, Luke laughed. He's my employee. The only one. Oh, I see. Management always intervenes for their subordinates, Travis joked. That's how we are, blacksmiths, Luke replied. You know, Travis continued, I have crowds of people who want to join my squad. Aren't you jealous? No, just send me a few. Maybe you'll finally be alone, Luke joked. They both laughed. Garnet, watching them, said, I've never heard you speak so freely to anyone. We've known him since we were both rookies, Luke replied. Travis leaned in. Did you tell her about me? No. Then I'll introduce myself, he laughed. Travis from Black Blade Ridge. Nice to meet you, friend of my friend. Garnet shook his hand. Garnet, and I'll do it again. Travis smiled. You have the nerve to shake hands with such force. Nice. I didn't want to be underestimated because of my height, Garnet replied. Luke, this kid is promising, Travis exclaimed. Should I take him on my team? No, Luke replied. He's my only employee, remember? If Travis found out Garnet was a girl, he would faint on the spot, Luke thought, barely holding back his laughter. And just then, they were called from the other end of the hall. Mr. Luke, concentrate, the scholar from the Order of the Golden Fangs called out. Oh, excuse me, he smiled. What exactly needs to be restored? This is it, he pointed. Luke frowned. The door? A metal gate with a crack in the middle. The control mechanism is broken. Mages with repair skills couldn't do anything. Manual repair would take a week. I understand, Luke nodded. If we use the fragments of the mithril wall to rebuild, the structure will stabilize. He activated the recovery skill. A glow ran through the metal and the gate healed before his eyes. Done, Luke said. Check. The scientist touched the door and suddenly froze. The ground shook. What is this? Someone shouted. Luke asked, What did you do? Nothing. The mechanism turned on by itself, he exclaimed, turning pale. A giant golem rose from the darkness before them. Its eyes flashed blue. The people shouted, Back off! The golem raised its hand. I won't have time to use the split, Luke thought. At that moment, Garnet lunged forward and punched the golem hard in the chest. The metal giant staggered and fell with a thud. White Wolf, are you okay? She shouted. Garnet, he said, shocked. But the monster got up again. He doesn't care, the girl exclaimed. Where is their weak spot? Magic runes on the back of their heads, Luke replied. Hit there. Understood. Garnet jumped up and punched the golem in the back of the head. Yes, one of the knights exclaimed. But she did not relax. It's not time to celebrate. There may be more. Travis flexed his fists. Nice demonstration of strength. Time for me to stretch too. The next golem moved forward. Come on, big guy, Travis shouted, punching his enemy so hard that he crumbled. It's been a long time since I've had a worthy opponent. He laughed. Garnet, wiping her sweat, said, Not bad, Dad. I'm not your dad, Travis shouted, waving Garnet away. Luke and I are the same age. Really? She said, her mouth hanging open. You look older. It's experience, not age, he growled, and Luke could barely contain his laughter. But the joke was cut short when behind Garnet there was a heavy thud. The huge golem rose a second time and swung. The girl jumped back, and fragments of stone scattered right under her feet. Are you overdoing it? Luke shouted. But I'm just warming up, she laughed. The main thing is not to spend all your strength on these games, Luke warned. But I'll finish before I get tired, Travis replied, clenching his fist. But this stone monster is clearly not going to give up. And he rushed into the attack again, breaking the slabs underfoot. Cover the flanks. Get ready, came the order. The adventurers moved into battle in unison. Garnet looked over her shoulder and called out, I think Dad. Oh, so Travis will figure it out himself. Her voice was lost in the roar. Noir, watching from the side, whispered, These golems surround the Dark Fortress, don't they? Maybe they're from the Dark King's arsenal? Or his people just found old mechanisms and used them, Luke replied. Garnet thought for a moment, and Noir continued. If the dwarves were forced to dig mines, maybe they weren't looking for ore, but for these machines. In any case, the Order of the Golden Fangs should be notified. Agreed, Luke nodded seriously. Later at home, Luke was exhausted, but work was not waiting. What's for dinner? Garnet said. I don't want to go out, he sighed. Make something simple, please. Okay, she said, chopping the vegetables. But don't complain later if the result is strange. Got it? Yes, chef, Luke smiled. And thank you. He was about to start working on the papers when there was a knock on the door. Opening it, Luke said in surprise, It's quite late. Has something happened? Sakura stood on the threshold. She bowed low. Sorry for being so late. I came about my request. About the crimson katana? Luke smiled. So easy to guess? She blurted out. Handing him the sword, the girl said, I don't want to rush, but if possible, finish it faster. The final stage won't take long, Luke replied. Great. Sakura breathed a sigh of relief. But first explain, he said seriously. Nagi warned me not to forge a sword from scarlet. Why? Sakura froze. Luke added, I'm not refusing. I just want to know the reason. Mr. Luke, do you believe in God? She asked quietly. God? He asked. I'm not implying anything, the girl explained hastily. I'm asking literally. If those who grant us skills are called gods, perhaps they exist, she said. After all, the powers are given through a temple that corresponds to your class? Luke nodded. Perhaps, but I don't think about it any deeper. What if these forces have their own consciousness, she asked. Exist not as ideas, but as beings. Some believe so, Luke replied, but I haven't seen God, so I'm not sure. That's all, Sakura sighed. That's where our Eastern and Western philosophies are similar. Luke crossed his arms. What does this have to do with Nagi, exactly? Because he and I have different understandings of the source of power, she explained. I believe in a formless, higher energy, and he believes in a race of higher beings with consciousness. Luke smiled. So that's why he's hostile towards you? There's another reason, Sakura replied. It's more practical. My clan believes that divine power cannot be gained through faith alone. A ritual is needed that channels the energy of the gods into the body. The Nagi clan sees this as sacrilege that will bring punishment. So, Luke guessed, the ritual requires a scarlet sword? Yes, Sakura nodded. Only pure scarlet can channel the power into the chosen one. There was only one such sword made, but the records were lost in an accident, she added. Luke rubbed his temple. Now I understand why he warned me. Even if you forge the blade, the ceremony cannot be held immediately. Preparation is required. But I swear, I will not drag this country into trouble. Don't worry. I am not going to back down, Luke said. When the sword is ready, accept it without hesitation. If anything happens, I will share the responsibility. Mr. Luke, she whispered, not knowing what to say. Garnet appeared at the door. Sakura, will you have dinner with us? Thank you, but I've already made arrangements with Sylvia. The girl smiled. Sorry to bother you. It's okay, Luke replied. The next day, the knights were loading crates onto carts at the armory. Travis was showing off his new Garnet gauntlet and laughing. It works like a mithril fist. The order for the Order of the Golden Fangs has been fulfilled, Luke said. There's only one thing left. At that moment, Sakura appeared in the doorway. I was just wondering when you'd come in. He held out his sword to her. The katana is ready. She carefully drew the blade from its scabbard. Here it is. A true crimson katana, she whispered. The metal flickered with cold flame, hot to the touch, but icy to the touch. A majestic... Thank you, Mr. Luke. I am in deep debt. Remember what he said. I'm not sure this blade will stand up to battle. I don't know if scarlet is suitable for a weapon of war. There are blades made entirely of it, she replied, from tip to hilt. But now your sword is ceremonial. What will you fight with? Luke asked. A fair question, Sakura smiled. I guess I'll have to learn a Western blade. Luke opened the box. I guessed you didn't have a spare. What is this? She was surprised. A sword I forged from the steel of your katana and the fragments of the scarlet. If the old one can't stand it, this one will save you. Embarrassed, Sakura lowered her gaze. You've done so much for me. I don't even know how to thank you. Luke smiled softly. Don't cry. You've already paid back in full, and that's enough. Her eyes sparkled, but she nodded, clutching her sword. A voice came from the door. Mr. Luke, excuse me, but a lady has come to see you. We are already closed, and he replied. Ask her to come tomorrow. The messenger hesitated before adding, She is not a customer. She says she has a conversation with you personally. Luke looked out and froze. Noir? A few minutes later, they were sitting across from each other at the table. Sakura and Garnet exchanged displeased glances. The tension was even felt in the air. So what brings you here so late? Luke asked dryly. Noir replied calmly. I heard in the order that you are short of workers. If you allow me, I want to work here. What? He was surprised. Are you serious? You're helping the Order of the Golden Fangs with their investigation. Don't tell me you were forced to work here for free. He squinted suspiciously. Garnet instantly hit him on the head. Don't be a fool. She just wants to atone for her guilt. By helping you, she is helping herself. She is tormented by what happened, she added. She cannot forgive herself for betraying you then. Noir clasped her hands in her lap. Yes, you're right. I can't bear the thought of living on, letting the guilt fade. Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with determination. I don't need a salary, she said. The opportunity to be useful is enough for me. Mr. Luke, Sakura interjected, let me tell you, this woman was captured with the hero's party, wasn't she? Her own sister is still in the hands of the Dark King, Sakura continued. Maybe she was forced to obey him with magic? That's not true, Noir exclaimed. Enough, Luke stopped them. I'm sure we have nothing to worry about. He crossed his arms and closed his eyes. The Order of the Golden Fangs was supposed to test her for a spell. If they found anything, they wouldn't let her go, right? Yes, Garnet agreed. Even if the influence remains, she continued, her target is definitely not you. She escaped before she fell under the Dark King's control. Then the order of events is indeed different, Sakura agreed. Luke looked at her. So she's under the Order's watch now? Yes, Sakura confirmed. If you're sure she's not dangerous, I don't mind. You still work for them as a guide, right? Luke asked. Yes, but only a few times a month, Noir replied. So decide for yourself, he said. I don't have any particular animosity towards you. You followed Falcon not out of loyalty to him, but because of your sister, didn't you? If I stay, I will try to atone for my guilt. If I leave, I will live, consumed by it, Noir whispered. Falcon is the one you seek to punish, not me. Luke nodded. I don't have time to judge you. Do as you see fit. Then Noir began, but he stopped her. There's one but. I can't accept your offer without payment. It goes against my principles. I understand, Noir replied quietly. Whatever you say. Working without payment is a joke, right? He clarified. If they find out about this, everyone will decide that I'm exploiting people. No, if you work here, you'll have a decent salary. Period. Sakura sighed, smiling. There he is, our master Luke. Too soft as usual, Garnet grumbled. Are you sure? Noir asked. Yes, and don't thank me too soon. I still have to work. You asked for the job honestly, he said, and I have so many orders that I would be a fool to refuse. Get ready, we'll start tomorrow. Noir jumped up, thanking him excitedly. Luke just sighed. How did I get involved in this again? Workers are needed, and help comes from those seeking redemption. The next morning he showed her the composition. First, let's see what you're capable of. Noir tried to lift the box, but she couldn't. Is it difficult? He asked. No, I can do it, she assured him, even though her hands were shaking. Okay, then we'll test you as a saleswoman. You don't have to lift anything heavy, Luke said. The girl approached the customer. How can I help you? And immediately lowered her head, embarrassed. Luke smiled. Not bad, but try to smile a little more naturally. Smile? Noir was confused. She showed a slightly predatory smile. Like that? No, not like that. Luke waved away in fright. Excuse me, she stammered, lowering her eyes. Pointing to the table in the middle of the room, she asked, What is this? My office, he replied. Here I keep records and calculate profits. Usually only adventurers help me for a short time, but I don't trust them with the accounting. Noir, folding her hands behind her back, timidly asked, And you're really going to entrust this to me? I'll check the finals myself, he replied, but I trust you to try. Wouldn't it be better to entrust Garnet? No, she's already overloaded. I don't want to finish her off, Luke said. Noir nodded, pointing to the table. Then, I'll try. Please, he said. She took the pen, trembling a little, and began to write. After a few minutes, she raised her head. Done. Luke was surprised. Really, so quickly? Yes, Noir answered, smiling sincerely for the first time. It doesn't take skill. Smiling, Noir said that true magic lies in knowledge. A magician needs more than just skills, she explained. I have studied ancient grimoires to the last letter, and now I write my own treatises based on that research. She added that this required fast reading and perhaps soon, lightning-fast writing. Luke nodded. Quite logical. I've always imagined wizards surrounded by mountains of paper and ink. And don't they print grimoires, he asked? There are printing houses in big cities. They're useless, Noir replied in embarrassment, and seeing his surprise, she hurried to explain. If you write a spell without magical nourishment, it will lose its power. The ink simply cannot hold the structure of the spell. Without the energy of the author, the text becomes distorted, and 2 or 3 layers of knowledge disappear without a trace. Luke thought for a moment, then said, You'd be a great help if you help with the notes. I'll probably call on you more often. Noir, stunned, just nodded. Yes, of course. Her gaze was clouded by a memory of how her sister had once handed her a pile of manuscripts. Can you handle it? Yes, Noir replied then, trying not to show her excitement. Her sister only smiled. You're so calm, a real support. My little sister. No? Noir whispered softly. She's been dragging me along all my life. I was just trying to keep up. Her voice trembled, but there was tenderness and pain in it. She looked up, already smiling. I'm glad to help. It's my nature. Luke replied that it was truly impressive and assured him that he would rely on her knowledge more often in the future. A week passed. Garnet sighed. Noir is late. He must have overslept. I don't care, she grumbled, but it's still interesting. Noir ran in the door, out of breath, apologizing. Excuse me, am I late? No, just in time, Luke smiled. Are you okay? Yes, I just worked a little at night, she replied. On the table lay scrolls, bracelets, pendants. Did you make this yourself? Luke asked. Yes, Noir nodded. I have the skill of magic. Magical items? Garnet was surprised. I haven't done this in a long time, but it seems to have turned out well. Maybe we can put them up for sale? Noir suggested hopefully. Sell to adventurer? Luke asked. Exactly, she confirmed. Garnet said it was a great idea. There aren't any magic shops in Green Valley. Sorcery is a lower-level skill for black magicians, Luke explained. That's why few of them do it professionally. The demand is high, and the supply is meager. Do you think they'll sell? Garnet asked. Luke carefully examined the amulet in his hands and nodded. Yes, let's start with these. Let's see what happens. Really? Noir was delighted. Yes, but don't forget to rest, he warned, leaning closer. You're pale. Next time we'll set aside time specifically for magical creation. Sleep is part of the job, too. I understand, she said quietly, blushing slightly. There aren't many visitors today, Luke added. Go and rest in the spare room. No, I can still work, she objected, but he insisted. Luke turned to Garnet. Is something wrong? Nothing, she grumbled, turning away. At that moment, Sylvia entered the store, greeted her, and set down her basket. Here's your lunch. Thank you, Luke replied. Seeing the magical things, Sylvia was surprised. Where did these come from? Are you selling magic now? Noir made them herself, Luke explained. They're very beautiful, she said, taking the talisman. What are they called? Talismans bring good luck. And these are amulets. They protect against evil and bad luck, Luke explained. Are the scrolls also magical? Yes, they are spell scrolls. They allow you to use spells without the magician's skill. It's incredible, Sylvia exclaimed. I didn't even know such things were possible. They're expendable, Luke clarified, and disappear after activation. But the fact that someone can create this is a miracle. Where's Noir? Sylvia asked. She's sleeping, Luke replied. I'm just going to wake her up. Dinner's ready. He pulled back the curtain and quietly opened the door. Noir, it's time to eat, but the room was empty. Luke became wary. Has she really left? He thought. But he heard quiet breathing on the other side of the door. He carefully peered through the crack and thought, has she really mixed up the rooms? Noir? He called. 5 more minutes, Blanca, she muttered in her sleep. Luke asked in surprise. What? Who? The girl opened her eyes, got up in fright. Excuse me, I'm well rested, I can work. Okay, Luke smiled. But this is my room. The one next door is free. The girl blushed to the very ears. Luke rubbed his neck nervously, thinking that it would probably be better to remain silent. Sylvia has brought dinner. Let's go, he said. And just then Garnet exclaimed, White Wolf, you are called from the Order of the Golden Fangs. Urgent business. Understood, Luke shouted and ran out. When he returned, the knight was already waiting. Mr. Luke, please come with me to the Dark Fortress area. We urgently need your repair skills. At the scene, he saw a destroyed suspension bridge. The ropes are cut, he muttered. So an attack. It's a good thing I took the mana crystal, Luke said, taking out the shining stone. I can repair the bridge right now. Everyone is ready. An attack is possible. Yes, sir, the knights replied, preparing for battle. Luke activated the skill. A bright light spread along the torn ropes, and the suspension bridge began to rebuild, thread by thread. The repair is complete, he shouted. The knights rejoiced, and Luke strengthened the foundations and ordered them to move on. They want me to fix the suspension part too, he muttered, clutching the mana crystal. The Dark Fortress fortifications stood among narrow mountain gorges. A deep chasm divided the area, so the knights built a rope bridge, and behind it a small camp that served as a stronghold. So the enemy holds this side? Luke asked. Yes, sir. We tried to get to the mine, but we were cut off. The bridge was broken, and the men in the camp were cut off without reinforcements. If the dark forces attack the isolated camp, Luke began. Exactly, the knight confirmed. We summoned an A-rank adventurer, but he cannot cross over to the other side. 2 A-ranks from the east have already left, another warrior added. Luke and Garnet exchanged glances. From the east? Luke asked. Couldn't it be Sakura and Nagi? That's them, the knight replied. They have fast movement. No one else has taken the risk. We can't leave them there, Garnet said firmly. I agree, Luke replied. The store will have to close. If you're leaving, I'm leaving too, Noir said, stepping out of the doorway. I'm sorry, but you're staying here, Luke said. As soon as the battle is over, you'll help rebuild the fortifications. Okay, she nodded, clutching her cloak. Garnet looked at Noir. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, just a little tired. Your strength is in magic, not in muscles. Don't exhaust yourself. Noir thoughtfully took the bag. Wait, I have something for you. She held out several amulets and scrolls. These are disposable magical items. Take them. Thank you, Luke replied. He hadn't planned to fight, but their conversation was interrupted by a rider galloping in the dust. Problem. Dark Army reinforcements are moving right this way. There are many more of them, the knight shouted. If they break through, the Green Valley will fall, Noir whispered, turning pale. The Dark King will destroy all our forces. And how many lives are you willing to lose? Luke asked coldly. Garnet gripped the hilt of her sword. White Wolf, what do you choose? Stand and bite your nails or run? Luke looked her straight in the eye. Neither one nor the other. The city is in danger, and Sakura is in the heart of the battle right now. I knew you would say that, Garnet smiled, already jumping into the saddle. She snatched the knight's lead. Let's borrow your horse. And if the camp falls, he shouted after her, then I'll just start rebuilding earlier than planned. Luke replied, jumping in behind Garnet. They rushed to the gate. Open it! The White Wolf is heading for the front! Garnet roared. Near the camp, the warriors shouted, Keep the golems away. Impossible. They are too strong, one replied. White Wolf, Garnet called out. I understand. Luke jumped down, activating the regeneration skill. The stone golem that had broken into the wall bounced off the restored barrier. The power of the skill increased so much that the shock wave threw the monster back. This is the power, someone whispered. White Wolf, the knight shouted. Garnet shouted, This monster is climbing over the wall. Its weak spot is covered by armor. There is only one way out. To let it in, shouted the knight. No. Luke stopped him. I have an idea. Hold him until I get to the top. The warriors followed the order. Luke climbed the wall, peering at the massive golem. Its weakness is the runes on the back of its head, he whispered. He reached out, activated the skill, and saw a glow. There you are, Luke shouted, striking with a magical pulse. A blast of light tore the air apart, but the wall trembled, cracking. Damn, it's too damaged, Luke cursed. He hasn't changed, has he? Came a voice from behind. Luke looked around. Dustin? Get off this tower, you idiot, the hunter shouted at the darkness. Am I too easy a target? Luke asked. Exactly, Dustin growled and threw his spear right at Luke's feet, causing him to lose his balance and fall. Garnet caught him. Are you crazy? Luke exclaimed, pulling himself out of her arms. That was the quickest way to get you down, Dustin replied calmly. A little more and I'll serve him your eggs on a plate. Not the Dark Army, Garnet growled. Don't worry, the hunter shrugged. I knew you'd catch him. And if not, she shouted angrily. Then he would have learned to fly, Dustin chuckled. By the way, there were 4 of them. 2 of them haven't moved since you were playing hero. Enough arguing, Luke interrupted. Dustin is always like that. But I'm grateful, and so are you, Garnet, for catching me. Sorry, she muttered, looking away. A cool blow, the warrior exclaimed. Is the arm intact? Yes, Luke answered. Thanks to the Noir artifact. For a girl with such doubts, she's a great mage, Garnet said. Her things are impeccable. By the way, here it is, Luke pointed. Mr. Luke, a familiar voice rang out. Sakura ran up, her sword flashing. Are you here? And Garnet too? Are you okay? Of course. My katan gives the strength of 1,000 warriors. Thank the gods, Luke sighed. Strange to see you around, he smiled. We met Noir on the way back from the battle, Sakura explained. Noir nodded. Yes, we decided to wait together. The battle isn't over yet. Luke laughing asked when they had become friends. Noir replied that she had asked Sakura to help her buy components for magical artifacts. Sakura laughed, remembering how she had said back then that she wanted to be useful to Mr. Luke. Noir blushed, denying, No, I just wanted to help. You're already helping a lot, Luke said with a sincere smile. Really? She asked, not believing her ears. Thank the gods, Noir whispered, sighing with relief. I'm glad I'm of use. Then there was silence. It was eerie no sound, no movement. Too quiet, Luke said. They haven't retreated. They're just waiting for help. Mr. Luke, a voice called out. He turned to Nagi. Glad to see you're alive. You're not listening to me as usual, he snapped. Shiranui's katana is made of scarletite, right? Luke was about to say something, but Sakura shouted, Kirigakure, this is between me and Mr. Luke. Don't interfere, Sakura said sharply. I warned you that substituting the power of the gods is dangerous, Nagi snapped. You know that better than anyone. Do you want to repeat your father's fate? How dare you, she exclaimed. My father was the victim of an imperfect ritual. It can be completed if the distortion is corrected. And why do you believe that? Nagi asked mockingly. At that moment, the door opened, and the girl ran in. There you are. Melissa, Nagi shouted as she threw herself on his neck. I was so worried. Don't you dare disappear like that. I can't breathe, he gasped. Luke looked away. I guess we'll leave them. This isn't our scene. I'll go to the main gate, Sakura said, gathering herself again. Mr. Luke, take care of yourself. Noir was about to say something, but Garnet stopped her. This is Sakura's business. Don't come in. They were already heading for the fortifications when they heard shouts. They're coming from the rear, the sentry shouted. Prepare your defenses. We must hurry, Garnet shouted. I know, Luke replied, gripping his sword. Ambush, it rang out. Cover the others. Who didn't notice them? Someone shouted. Clay mannequins, clay soldiers emerged from the darkness. Stay back, Dustin roared, stepping forward. His spear ripped open 3 clay warriors at once. Are there any more in them? He asked, wiping away the blood. I don't think so, the knights replied. His strength, as always, was impressive. What kind of creatures are these? Luke wondered. And why didn't anyone notice them? If you're interested in why, Dustin grumbled, ask someone who's lost their guard. Lord Luke, the knight shouted, the enemy is going around the far wall. Your skill is needed. I'm coming, he replied and ran. Hold on, Garnet said. We'll manage, they replied with a smile. Dark army on all sides, the warriors shouted. Don't relax, Garnet shouted to Luke. But suddenly Sakura flew out of the rampart, fell and immediately got up with a scream. Damn, what a shame. A tall man in black armor stood before her. An interesting blade, he said. I've never seen metal like it. It'll be a nice trophy when I get it off your body. You are responsible for these attacks, Luke said, raising his sword. What is this mass of muscle? Garnet snapped. Noir paled and fell to her knees. Norcy, so we meet again. Run away, he sneered. You brought the knights here, didn't you? I wonder what your abandoned sister will say. His voice was blood-chilling. Noir only gasped. White Wolf, Garnet shouted. I'll distract him, and you repair the fortifications. She flew into the air. Sakura lunged with her katana. The name Norcy flashed through Luke's memory. This very bastard, a henchman of the Dark King Gandalf, had been among those who had destroyed Falcon's squad. Norcy swung his sword and scattered the girls like dolls. Nice repair skill, he laughed. Repaired the wall right during the battle. He swung at Luke. Quick! The hero only had time to think. White Wolf, be careful! Garnet shouted. But at that moment Sakura rushed forward, using a lightning dash. The blade went through Sakura. Sakura! Luke shouted, catching her body. Her wound shone, as if it were being consumed by the sword itself. Are you alive? He shouted. The girl barely whispered. Mr. Luke. Garnet froze. She's cut in half. What was that? Norcy wondered, looking at his weapon. You think this trick will stop me? He laughed. Shut up! Garnet shouted and kicked the monster against the wall. The stone cracked. His body began to grow stone. A huge block flew up and fell directly on Garnet, pinning her to the ground. Blood flowed from his mouth. Garnet! Luke shouted and rushed forward. Norcy only smiled ominously. He stepped on the girl's stomach, pinning her to the ground. I like that look of despair on your face, White Wolf. Maybe I should break your legs first? He laughed. Suddenly, Nagi appeared behind him. His dagger stuck straight into Norcy's eye. Norcy roared. Mr. Luke, now is your chance, shouted Nagi. Luke rushed to Garnet, lifted her into his arms. Not so fast, Norcy growled, getting to his feet. Luke touched the ground, activating the regeneration skill. Light passed through the girl's body. What kind of perverted power is this? Norcy was surprised. Luke did not hear, only held Garnet, whispering her name. Hold on. I'll get you back, he whispered. Ironic, isn't it? You used to support me. Now I'm carrying you. Patient, Norcy hissed. A true hero, he raised his hand. You're not going anywhere. But Sakura, standing up, shouted, Mr. Luke! Shiranui, don't you dare! Nagi shouted, stopping her. Luke felt how suddenly it got cold around him. The air froze. The ground was covered with ice. Ice stones? He whispered. Your skills have taken our advantage, Norcy roared. Our plan was thwarted because of you. You are the reason for everything. That's not true, Luke replied. We fight not for ourselves, but for others. And in vain, Norcy hissed. I will bring your head to the Dark King, as a sacrifice. Luke took off his gloves, looking him straight in the eye. Try it. I have a sacrifice for you, too.